Chapter 341, Analysis of the Black Tower. Ningguang was not a short-sighted businesswoman. Remember, she had once been the Tianquan Star, the one who controlled Liyue Harbor's economic lifeline and balanced competing powers. She had long been in the habit of looking at problems and making rules with the perspective of centuries, even millennia. Moments ago, she had been absorbed by the scene outside the city walls, her thoughts shaken by the screams of battle and the immediate crisis. With Xiao Heita's perfectly timed, gentle reminder, the pieces snapped into place. Gan Yu, nearby, kept her composed, serene demeanor. She only gave a slight nod when the idea was voiced. Her pale blue eyes showed no ripple of emotion. This half-immortal Qilin, who had served as secretary to the Liyue Qixing for thousands of years, had already perceived the cold, ruthless logic behind Lu Jingming's plan earlier than most. Xiao Heita's words only confirmed what she had suspected. "Good that you understand," Xiao Heita said, clearly pleased with Ningguang's grasp. A clever, lively expression crossed the doll's face. "On the surface, it looks like that kid is being hoisted by his own petard. A holy grail war he arranged has spawned two uncontrollable big bosses and put him on the back foot. But in reality, that's likely exactly what he intended, or at least something he's perfectly willing to accept." She paused, pointed at the distant city walls where artillery fire still raged, and humans and spirit beasts were tearing each other apart in brutal, primitive fashion, lives ending by the second. Among complex carbon-based organisms like humans, there's a fascinating social phenomenon. Her tone turned almost academic. Normally, for sake of interest, territory, or ideals, people will fight to the death, obsess over vendettas for generations, and keep feuds alive forever. But when a single, overwhelmingly powerful external threat appears, one that truly endangers everyone's survival, they'll often develop astonishing cohesion. Old enmities are set aside almost immediately to face the common enemy. She cited history. A classic example is the Douluo Continent 4,000 years ago. The three kingdoms, Tianhun, Star Luo, and Douling, had been at war for centuries, their hatred woven into their bones. But when the Sun Moon Empire came from across the sea with its revolutionary Spirit Tool army and tried to conquer the continent, those sworn enemies quickly put aside their grievances and formed a coalition. This is survival instinct at a genetic level. A shared mortal threat is the quickest, strongest adhesive for repairing internal rifts. Xiao Heita's analysis was sharp. Her gaze returned to Ningguang with a hint of prompting. "Think about it. That kid's ultimate strategic goal is to unify the Douluo Continent and create a new, more efficient order." Ningguang took over smoothly, fingers tapping the white jade railing as her pipe clicked against it. Her eyes brightened as if she could already see the chessboard spread across the continent. "But the four great empires are deeply entrenched. How many entrenched nobles have served their imperial families for generations? How many ministers and loyalists still cling to the old family and country ideals, swearing never to serve another master? Even if he crushes the imperial regimes by force and achieves formal unification, resistance will fester. Loyalists will lurk in the shadows like weeds, sparking endless turmoil. The cost of governance would be astronomical. And the hundreds of millions of ordinary people in those empires are used to their identities. Tianhun people, Star Luo people, Sun Moon people. Those identities have been silted down over thousands of years. Convincing them to accept a completely new identity, citizens of Sea Abyss City or of the unified Douluo Continent, would take enormous cultural output, education, and material incentives. This process could take decades, maybe a century. During that time, any misstep could trigger large-scale unrest. Xiao Heita fell silent, knowing that with Ningguang's experience, she didn't need to spell out the rest. The single premise she'd offered was enough for Ningguang to reconstruct the full breadth of Lu Jingming's plan. So the continent needs a common enemy, powerful enough that no single empire can resist it alone. Ningguang continued, voice cool, eyes taking on a sharp clarity. That enemy must be terrifyingly powerful, able to threaten the very basis of survival for all intelligent life on the continent. Everyone must see that as long as they're divided, they face equal annihilation. Only that level of existential threat can force nations to set aside internal disputes, class differences, and even the ancient hatred between spirit beasts and humans, and make them unite out of sheer survival instinct. At that point, unification won't be a conquest imposed from above by Sea Abyss City. It will be the survivor's inevitable choice, a desperate grasp at a single hope. Resistance will be minimized. Many will pledge themselves willingly. Ningguang understood then the deep purpose behind Lu Jingming's apparent ruthlessness. Letting Huanlong seize the golden tree, tolerating Xing Xiao's provocations in Mingdu, those weren't mistakes or failures of control. They were deliberate. He was manufacturing two Lords of Destruction and their antimatter legion into an existential threat over the Douluo Continent. Then, in the crisis' dark hour, Lu Jingming would step forward as the savior who could save everyone. As long as the fear and destructive potential of the Antimatter Legion and the Lords of Destruction drilled into every living being on the Douluo star, so that emperors and commoners alike understood that without unity under Lu Jingming, there was only the end, then nobles, imperial armies, spirit tool legions, even the wild vicious beasts, would be forced to stifle their grudges and cling to whoever could counter that disaster. Old identities like Tianhun people or Star Luo people would fade under the pressing need to survive. The new identity, citizens of the unified continent or of Lu Jingming's empire, would replace them. It was the classic destruction prefaces construction. Use overwhelming external pressure to shatter old institutions, then build a new order on the ruins. And what's even more brilliant, Ningguang said, a complex smile pulling at her lips as she twirled the pipe between her slender fingers, is that he probably doesn't intend to completely annihilate the Antimatter Legion. She leaned into the darker sophistication of the plan. If he simply repels their offensive enough to control the threat's scope rather than eradicate it, the sword of Damocles will remain. A latent, ongoing possibility of annihilation keeps every power in perpetual vigilance. As long as no single force feels capable of taking on the Antimatter Legion alone, they'll cling to Lu Jingming, the one who can protect them. It's the ultimate tactic. Manufacture the enemy that boosts your legitimacy. It's ruthless and genius. Her voice took on a broader, almost philosophical tone. From ancient times through countless worlds and galaxies, civilizations have always needed antagonists. Light creates shadow. Order needs chaos. Good and evil define each other. By keeping a moderate but unmistakable threat and a visible hope in balance, you force civilization to stay alert, to mobilize potential, and to unite fragmented forces so it can survive and develop even amid crisis. What Lu Jingming sought was not a state sewn together by brute force, full of hidden resistance. He wanted a community fused by a shared sense of destiny, an identity that transcended old borders, races, and classes. The Antimatter Legion and the two Lords of Destruction were his crucible. Their shadow would be the most efficient forge for the new order. Enough talk. It's time to go. Xiao Heita clapped, and a rippling, silvery spatial glow began to coil around the doll as precise coordinates were locked in. If we wait, and Huanlong determines a victor and absorbs those two divine senses, she could detect us. We're not afraid of her, but there's no need to complicate matters. It wouldn't do to interfere with that kid's plan. Ningguang gave a slight nod. She took one last look at the ancient, magnificent city beyond the window, now burning and screaming, edging toward ruin. Any faint regret in her golden eyes had vanished, replaced by calm calculation and a quiet anticipation for the new order to come. She turned and walked briskly toward the stairs, her high heels tapping against the polished floor, her skirt sweeping elegantly as she descended. End of chapter. Chapter 342. Sea God Tangsan vs Huanlong Ganyu remained gentle and silent as always, quietly following behind Ningguang. Xiao Heita cast one last glance at the golden tree, a faint smile touching her lips. As the three figures vanished completely into the staircase at the top floor of Kunyu Pavilion, an incredibly dazzling, expansive silver light erupted around the pavilion. Like a bubble expanding in an instant, it swept over the entire main building and the plaza below. In the next heartbeat, the silver light receded, ebbing away like a tide. The bustling plaza was suddenly empty. The magnificent Kunyu Pavilion still stood, but inside it was deserted. Everyone who had been gathered there had been taken elsewhere. Ningguang, Ganyu, Xiao Heita, and all the Kunyu Pavilion staff had been transferred out of Shrek City by a spatial power beyond comprehension, along with necessary supplies, as if they had never been there at all. Within the golden tree, the sea of life spread vast and boundless. The life energy was so concentrated it had become almost liquid, shimmering with a brilliant, sacred golden-green light, each drop carrying immense vitality that spirit masters in the outside world would covet. If an ordinary spirit master could absorb even a trace of it, they might be reborn and leap forward in their cultivation. This had long been one of the crucial nodes in Douluo Star's web of life, a supreme holy place for nurturing life and purifying corruption, soaked in auspicious, warm, life-giving aura. But now that ancient inviolate life domain was being invaded by a cold, greedy will of destruction that did not belong to this world. Rumble. Towering waves rose without warning from the calm sea of life. The ocean of pure life essence was violently pushed aside by a barbaric alien energy, emitting a wail as if heaven and earth were being torn. Space shook, and golden motes of life scattered like startled fireflies. Huanlong's true form fully manifested here, far stranger and more terrifying than anything known on Douluo Continent. She was not a flesh and blood being, but an aggregation of destructive will, an energy construct wreathed in ceaseless purple-black flames. Her form swelled the instant she appeared, blotting out the sun, like an ancient demon god risen from the abyss, seeming to fill the entire space within the golden tree. Thousands of strands of energy burned with purple-black fire, like withered branches and writhing tentacles whipping about like hair. Each strand carried an aura of annihilation that withered life and corroded souls. Her very presence poisoned the surrounding pure life energy. She seemed to sneer. Her laughter was cold and bone-chilling, a biting wind across an ice plain, echoing over the boiling sea of life and bringing only profound chill and despair. One of her hands, delicate in shape but made of energy, lifted. In her palm, destructive energy condensed impossibly, compressing into a miniature, pockmarked lava-like world. Though small, the phantom planet radiated a crushing weight that strained space itself. The lava-like veins across its surface were imprints of countless wailing souls, a terrifying oppression that made even divine souls tremble and disintegrate. Its presence caused the surrounding sea of life to boil and retreat. Be destroyed. Huanlong's voice carried cruel mockery, as if toying with insects. Her wrist sank imperceptibly, and the destructive star, bearing the weight of a small world, slammed down toward the solemn figure of sea god Tang San below. Sea god Tang San's divine sense clone remained composed in the face of a world-destroying strike. He looked minuscule beside Huanlong's vast energy body, yet the sea god light emanating from him was as solid as matter, azure and mountain steadfast. His sea-blue hair streamed in the turbulent winds of power, and the crushing destructive star reflected clearly in his ocean-deep eyes. There was no panic, only absolute focus. Mother, step back. Protect your divine sense origin with everything you have. Do not interrupt the refining, Tang San ordered in a deep voice, his words cutting through the roar like a surging wave. He thrust the golden trident that symbolized the sea god's authority forward. Om! The sea god trident exploded with unprecedented golden light, and boundless sea god divine force poured out like a breached flood. Though the sea of life was not a true ocean, its liquid essence and immense life energy were highly compatible with the sea god's power. Under Tang San's will, the sea of life seemed to answer him as a real ocean would, imbued with purpose and dominated by its master. Roar! The water dragon that had been an energy phantom coiling around the trident roared, shaking the very space and striking at the destructive strike. In a 10,000th of a second, its form inflated 1,000-fold, becoming solid and immense, each scale visible, shimmering with blue-gold holy light. In its great dragon eyes blazed the azure fire of the sea god. It was no longer a mere construct, but the full embodiment of the sea of life's might and the sea god's supreme authority. Laden with world-moving power, it surged up to meet the falling destructive planet. Who are you? This intensity of mental force and this purity of destructive will could never have been born on Douluo Continent or any of the known nearby planes, Tang San called over the collision, his voice grave and probing. His divine sense clone's core mission was to protect his mother, Yin, so she could complete the golden tree's refining. Now he faced an enemy that exceeded all contingency, an oppressive, godlike force of destruction, colder and more absolute than any authority of destruction he knew. My name is unimportant. Such barbaric destruction lacks a certain artistic grace, Huanlong said, her voice ethereal and cold, falling from a great height as if looking down at ants. But I am not reckless. Change of approach can be effective. I will bring you the most complete end and silence. The destructive power in her hand did not diminish. If anything, it grew more furious. The light poured down from the miniature planet like a waterfall from the heavens. Wherever it passed, the vibrant sea of life was rapidly polluted, decomposed, and erased. Even the ancient spatial barrier within the golden tree began to emit an unbearable, grinding cry, as if ready to shatter. Tongsan's torrent of life energy, channeled through the sea god divine force, crashed into Huanlong's pure destructive power. Each collision birthed terrifying storms of spirit force and energy turbulence that could instantly send an ordinary, titled Douluo soul flying in spirit scattering. The violent fluctuations far exceeded the golden tree's internal tolerance. The destructive shockwaves, as if tangible, punched through the tree's natural spatial barrier and spilled into the material world. At the heart of Shrek Academy, Sea God Island, the ancient golden tree, once bathed in gentle sacred light, began to quake violently. Its immense, thick trunk, one that took dozens of people to encircle, flickered between midday brilliance and being engulfed by a devouring purple-black light. A terrifying, heart-stopping, utterly oppressive aura spread outward from the golden tree like a rampant plague. Mixed with the cries of life and the roars of destruction, it formed a dreadful mental pollution. Everyone remaining on Sea God Pavilion, research teachers not skilled in combat, elderly elders, ordinary staff, felt their hearts drop as if gripped by an invisible cold hand. Deep in their souls, instinctive, primal fear and trembling surged. Those with weaker cultivation turned ashen, staggering, their spirit power faltering. Some collapsed to the ground, shivering. What's happening? What's wrong with the golden tree? Such a terrifying aura. I feel like my soul is being torn apart. Look at the top of the tree. What is that black light flickering? Alert. Highest level alert. Find a way to notify Dean Yan and the city lord immediately. Something major is happening on Sea God Island. Chaos erupted inside and outside Sea God Pavilion. Frightened screams, shrill alarms, frantic running. No one could have imagined that within the Academy's sacred golden tree, the holy refuge they entrusted with their beliefs and hopes, a battle between gods beyond their comprehension was raging. And within the golden tree's core, the sea of life still boiled. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch. End of this chapter. Chapter 343, Silver and the Golden Tree. Little San. At the edge of the terrifying battlefield, in a pocket of relative safety, a beautiful young woman with sea blue hair and clear azure eyes watched Sea God Tongsan with overwhelming worry. She wore a luxurious blue and gold gown, delicate golden ribbons curling around the hem. A faint, calming fragrance drifted around her, accentuating a face of impossible, otherworldly beauty. This was the divine sense clone of Yin, Tongsan's mother. Following Tongsan's careful arrangements, this divine sense clone had come down to the Douluo Continent to slowly refine the golden tree's origin, intending to secure the god position of Douluo Star's life core so she might ascend to first-rank divinity. Because God Realm law forbade divinities from intervening directly in the lower realms with their main bodies, she could only send a wisp of divine sense to carry out the work. But because she was only a clone, her progress refining a behemoth like the golden tree, whose origin god position far exceeded that of a second-rank divinity, was painfully slow. Her ability to keep this task going depended largely on a 10,000-year tradition at Shrek Academy. Successive Sea God Pavilion masters, at the ends of their lives, voluntarily fused their life force, spirit power, and even soul origin into the golden tree. That accumulated human essence, already blended with the tree, served as a catalyst, allowing Yin's divine sense clone to gradually erode and refine the world core. Tongsan's plan had been that, when the moment came, Yin's main body would find an opportunity to descend to the Douluo Continent, finish the golden tree's refinement, and take its place as Douluo Star's world core. Tong Hao, Tongsan's father, would use the chance to refine the Douluo Continent's world will and become the lord of the Douluo world. Both would rise to first-rank divinities. Everything Tang San had done was calculated to give his parents a better future and to strengthen his faction. From his perspective, those were family and factional considerations, not simple matters of good and evil. Many things in the universe are matters of viewpoint. Nothing could fully brand Tang San as utterly evil. Yin's divine sense clone radiated a strong blue-gold light. Countless thick, blue-silver vines burst forth and wove together into a solid barrier, straining to resist the destructive fallout from the titanic clash between the two powers ahead. Her combat power was not overwhelming, but she was still a divinity's divine sense clone. Under full defense, keeping herself safe was a manageable task. Her delicate face was etched with anxiety, and she watched her son's figure with unblinking intensity. She could sense how immense the pressure on Tang San's clone had become. The strange enemy's power attribute was highly corrosive, maliciously consuming the golden tree's life energy. Yet she could not intervene, nor could she afford to be distracted. She had to focus every ounce of attention on refining the golden tree's origin. This was the keystone of the whole plan. Little San had obtained this rare opportunity at the risk of breaking God Realm law. If the refinement were interrupted, all their work would be wasted, and worse, the golden tree's instinctive will might lash out violently with catastrophic consequences. Little San, you must be careful. Yin prayed in silence, her crystal blue eyes full of maternal fear and determination. Tang San felt his mother's concern and steeled himself. The sea god trident in his hand moved like a dragon stirring the sea. The golden 13 tridents flowed through him with effortless mastery, their techniques reaching a transcendent state. He fully activated the vast sea of life. That majestic, liquid vitality alternately formed an indestructible azure shield and surged in violent, overwhelming waves, continually wearing down Huanlong's seemingly endless torrent of annihilation. You want to destroy Mother's opportunity? No matter who you are or where you come from, it's impossible. Tang San's divine sense voice rang cold and firm through the turbulent void. His divine sense clone existed for one purpose: to protect Yin's divine sense clone so she could complete the golden tree's refinement without interruption. The survival of Shrek City beyond this place and the attacks of wandering spirit beasts were not his immediate priority. Over the long years, Tang San's secret guidance of the Sea God Pavilion had been part of the plan. Without his hidden influence and God-rank methods, how could those 99-ranked Limit Douluo have truly and perfectly merged their souls and power into the Golden Tree, extending their existence and guarding Shrek Academy in a new form? It was an unspoken bargain. He gave successive Sea God Pavilion masters the chance to continue protecting Shrek Academy after death. In return, they offered the power of their lifelong cultivation and the origin of their souls as nourishment for Yin's refinement. For those at the edge of death, fusing into the Golden Tree might be the greatest honor and the most meaningful resting place. When he transplanted the Golden Tree to Shrek Academy, Tang San had planned to use the accumulated fortune of the Academy's generations of spirit masters to nourish it. The tree became Shrek's foundation, while Shrek's souls fed the tree, and Yin would gain from that in turn. In Tang San's eyes, it was a win-win. This sea of life will be your grave. Facing Huanlong, who sought to rip apart his 10,000-year scheme, Tang San's heart brimmed with killing intent. Huanlong seemed to savor the sight. She laughed, distorted and excited, and unleashed waves of ever-escalating destruction. Ha! Ha! Struggle! Resist! The flower of destruction that blooms in despair is the most moving, most tragically beautiful. Under the will of a divinity, the sea of life roared. From the great annihilator's hand, the stars of destruction fell. Two divine-rank beings from different worlds and systems, each at the pinnacle of their own power, fought desperately within Douluo Star's core life holy land. Tidal surges and violent light intertwined. Each collision was more than an exchange of energy. It was a clash of laws and wills. Inside the Golden Tree, the Sea of Life, meant to be a sanctuary of vitality and sanctity, had become a purgatory of destruction where two opposed ultimate forces battled savagely. Purple-black annihilation flames and the azure sea god divine force coiled like two monstrous dragons at war. Each strike, each clash, sent a terrible hum through space, making the world itself groan and quake. Boom! Huanlong flicked her wrist. Thousands of energy beams, condensed from purple-black flames, gnarled and like withered branches, tore through the air. They twisted and writhed into living, evil tentacles and wove into a net of destruction that covered the entire space above. From that mesh fell drops of pitch-black fire, capable of corroding divine souls and annihilating life, relentlessly pouring down upon Tang San's position. Tang San's face was calm as still water. The sea god trident flashed like lightning in his hand, leaving countless golden afterimages. Each afterimage struck at the energy nodes of the destructive flame network. The azure divine force of the sea god, like a violent deep-sea storm, battered and tore at the flame net's restraints with harsh, sizzling sounds. The destructive energy evaporated great swathes of the surrounding sea of life, tearing shocking voids into the field. A little interesting. Huanlong stood at the center of the frenzy she had created. At some point, an energy-folding fan covered in strange patterns had condensed in her hand. She fanned herself gently, wearing a playful cat-and-mouse smile, as if enjoying a splendid drama for its own sake. Your power system is somewhat similar to the mortals and even some spirit beasts of this world, yet it's purer, with a kind of, unpleasant taste. Truly annoying. Evil demon, you will not succeed. Tang San's voice carried through the roar with authority and severity. He'd already noticed many anomalies. Huanlong was not human or any spirit beast from Douluo Star, nor any race he recognized from the God Realm system. She existed as something strange, more like a pure energy consciousness collective born to destroy. Her ultimate will seemed made to end and obliterate all things. Though this Huanlong was only a divine sense clone at the moment, Tang San judged instantly that her objective was the Golden Tree's origin core. Even if his motives for having Yin refine the Golden Tree were selfish, hoping to help his parents ascend and to better protect Douluo Star, Tang San genuinely believed the refinement would benefit the continent's governance and defense. And Huanlong's aura was purely malignant. If she prevailed, Douluo Star would suffer unimaginable calamity. That touched Tang San's moral bottom line. What troubled him most was that, for some unknown reason, his connection to his God Realm main body had been severed by a powerful force. The clone's power drained with each use and could not be replenished. This duel had to finish quickly, and the cost would be immense. But for his mother, for Shrek, for the Douluo Continent, he had no choice but to fight to the death. What a righteous, awe-inspiring divinity, protector of all beings, truly moving. Huanlong covered her lips and chuckled. Her laughter chimed like silver bells, yet beneath it lay an ice that could chill souls. What a pity. In your eyes it is defilement and destruction, but in mine it is the highest sublimation and art. Destruction is the ultimate beauty. Withering is eternity. Let me fully display this ultimate art for you. Huanlong, the Great Annihilator. Chapter 344. 13 Golden Halberds. Huanlong elegantly lifted the flower branch made of annihilation energy in her hand, and the surrounding purple-black flames of destruction surged. The original net of annihilation reformed, splitting into countless thorny whips of burning void that tore through space from every direction, striking at Tang San from cunning, treacherous, and unpredictable angles. Space shattered like fragile glass wherever they passed, revealing the chaotic, dark void beyond. Immobilizing storm, Tang San did not dare the slightest negligence. The sea god trident unleashed another incomparably profound golden halo, and his mastery over the laws of time and space forcibly interfered with, twisted, and solidified their effects. The myriad raging annihilation thorns seemed to fall into an invisible, viscous quagmire of deep sea. Their speed dropped dramatically, their advance becoming laborious and sluggish. A genuine flash of surprise crossed Huanlong's face for the first time, quickly replaced by an even keener curiosity. Not brute force, but direct interference with the time-space laws of this realm? Interesting. Very interesting. Like a child who had discovered a new toy, she waved the branch gently. The giant tree phantom behind her, an emblem of annihilation, reappeared, and the wailing planetary phantoms hanging from its branches grew clearer and more pained. The giant tree swayed as if performing some ancient, blasphemous sacrificial rite. Reign of Withering, annihilation of all things. The thorny whips dissolved into countless purple-black petals, condensed to near perfection, black light flickering along their edges. They poured down like a torrential rain from the depths of the universe. Each petal resembled an insatiable miniature black hole, devouring life energy and matter in its path. Even light could not escape them. The annihilation energy they bore was so pure that it would unnerve any ordinary true god. Tang San's expression turned solemn. His vast sea god divine force surged without reserve, compressing before him into a thick, massive azure shield etched with innumerable defensive patterns. The rain of annihilating petals pelted the shield with a grating, corrosive hiss. The surface shuddered violently, its light fading visibly, as if it might shatter at any moment. No return. The golden trident sigil on Tang San's forehead flared as brilliant as the sun. He hurled the sea god trident with all his force. The weapon became a streak of golden lightning that tore through the heavens and earth, cutting a temporary vacuum through the rain of annihilation. Wherever it passed, the purple-black petals disintegrated like foam. The trident's divine light condensed at its tip, pointing straight for Huanlong's glabella, moving at a speed beyond thought. But the golden light passed through Huanlong's body without resistance. She was a stunning illusion. Her true body, like Gui Mei, stood in Tang San's absolute blind spot in his left peripheral vision. Her slender fingers seemed to point forward with a whisper. A minute seed of illusion, almost undetectable to divine sense, but bearing a trace of her origin annihilation will, slipped silently through Tang San's layers of divine force and sank into his left arm. Ugh! Tang San groaned as cold, desolate, and malign alien energy invaded his soul body. Purple-black, grotesque patterns crawled across the skin of his left arm and spread upward like living things. Wherever they passed, his sea god divine force was corrupted and assimilated, its will warping toward betrayal and annihilation. Such strange and sinister energy. His heart hammered. He could not hesitate. He activated the mysterious heaven skill mind cultivation technique to defend his origin, and simultaneously unleashed every scrap of sea god divine force he could muster. Brilliant golden blue light erupted from his body like a miniature supernova. Get out of me! With a low roar and consuming a large portion of origin divine force, he forcibly expelled the half-rooted seed of illusion along with the contaminated portion of his divine force. The purple-black mass exploded with a soft pop and dissolved into the air. Tang San's left arm returned to its azure glow, though dimmer, and his aura was slightly shaken. Oh, you can expel my seed of illusion so quickly? Huanlong retreated gracefully a short distance, covering her lips with a light laugh. Her eyes shone with even deeper investigative hunger. You are far more interesting than you seem. I cannot toy with you recklessly. Tang San gave no reply. His gaze was like ice. He knew ordinary methods would not truly pierce this unpredictable and vexing enemy. He had to use everything his clone could mobilize, a supreme strike to decide the contest. He inhaled deeply and poured all his remaining divine force into the sea god trident until the shaft hummed with unbearable power. 13 golden halberds, 13th form, body and halberd as one, stars shift. Man and halberd resonated to perfect fusion, becoming an intensely brilliant golden streak that seemed able to pierce galaxies and bend time-space. Its aura was indomitable, infused with resolute will, and it slammed toward Huanlong. The vast sea god domain unfurled fully. Azure light enveloped everything like a cosmic tide, an oppressive water pressure and spatial confinement forces superimposed, binding Huanlong as if in 100 million feet of deep-sea mud. Countless golden halberd phantoms erupted, sealing all possible escape trajectories. Facing this supreme strike, gathering all the power, will, and even part of the origin of sea god Tang San's clone, Huanlong finally abandoned her relaxed, playful demeanor. Astonishing determination and power, commendable. She clasped her hands slowly before her chest. Her voice became ethereal, solemn, and cold, like a sentence of final judgment. Then allow me, in the true form of the great Lord of Annihilation, to give you the respect you deserve. The Annihilation giant tree behind her expanded and solidified wildly. Its thick, pitch-black roots plunged into the surrounding void realm and even pierced into the golden tree's origin sea. They savagely drew boundless life essence, transforming it into pure annihilation power. Huanlong's energy body swelled, purple-black annihilation condensed into countless demonic black lotuses that spun around her. Her aura surged to inconceivable levels, bringing spiritual and energetic pressure that eclipsed her prior state many times over. This is annihilation of all things. She thrust her palms outward, a pitch-black orb like an abyss, seemingly capable of swallowing all light, condensed from the forcibly extracted life origin and her ultimate annihilation will. It drifted inexorably toward the golden streaking light that had cleaved everything to get here. The two titanic energies, both capable of rending continents and annihilating stars, collided in the core, most fragile region of the golden tree. Om! A colossal sound, beyond earthly language, did not travel through the air, but echoed directly in the deepest part of any soul that perceived the battle. The golden tree's interior shattered, inch by inch, like a broken mirror. Countless spatial fragments scattered, and chaotic turbulence swept everything with devastating force. The destructive surges born of this boundary-transcending collision could not be contained by the golden tree's own spatial barrier. Like a volcano at breaking point, it burst through all restraints. Outside, on Sea God Island, boom! The entire island endured an unprecedented quake. The ground split into bottomless chasms. Centered on the golden tree, a double-colored pillar of energy, brilliant golden blue entwined with ominous purple-black, shot into the sky, thick as a mountain, stirring clouds for thousands of miles and dyeing the heavens an oppressive hue. A terrifying divine-rank pressure, laced with annihilation, slapped down like an ancient mountain on the hearts and souls of everyone on the island. No, the golden tree. The golden tree is changing! Yan Xiaozhe went pale with horror. He no longer cared for composure as he stared at the convulsing, ancient golden tree, its light flickering like a dying sun. Only then did everyone behind him fully understand the catastrophe unfolding in the Academy's Holy Land. The familiar golden blue energy, the sea god's light that had guarded the Academy for generations, was the source of their faith. And the other, purple-black energy, its annihilation aura, far exceeded anything they had ever known, even surpassing what the frozen beast god Di Tian embodied. No, Di Tian? One senior elder of the Sea God Pavilion reacted with a trembling voice. Why hasn't he broken free yet? With his strength, he can't possibly remain frozen. What does the golden tree's anomaly have to do with him? All eyes swung to the golden-eyed Black Dragon King, still trapped in the giant ice crystal. Di Tian's abnormal silence, intertwined with the earth-shattering convulsions within the golden tree, wove a chilling, inscrutable enigma. Not only the Shrek Academy faction, the Spirit Beast army stood stunned and speechless at the sudden upheaval. What happened? What in the world is happening inside that tree? That tree. Biji's face was full of shock and dread as she looked towards Sea God Island and the golden tree that linked heaven and earth, now groaning in pain and erupting destructive energy. The two colliding bursts of power each bore a pressure on life and a sense of pure force that far outstripped what Di Tian had made her feel. It was the clash of true divine rank domains. Relief, fear, and bewilderment washed through her. It was fortunate the Spirit Beast army had not launched a full-scale assault after Di Tian's freezing. Had they charged into a battlefield dominated by these two terrifying existences, comparable to or surpassing ordinary divinities, the consequences would have been catastrophic beyond bearing. Even the vicious beasts would risk falling should they dare approach that battlefield. End of this chapter. At that moment, all the noise between heaven and earth seemed to fall mute. Humans and spirit beasts alike, regardless of rank or allegiance, could only stare up at the sky like ants, gazing helplessly at the golden tree as it shook violently, seeming ready to collapse. Two terrifying auras burst from the tree's core and met in savage conflict, overwhelming everyone's senses. One was an all-too-familiar azure sanctity, now precarious. The other was an alien, chillingly desolate, purplish-black evil. Every clash and tear between them warped the space itself, sending shudders into the depths of souls. Hearts were filled with boundless fear, a crushing awareness of their own insignificance before such power, and a baffled dread at what was happening. The Spirit Beast assault had long since stalled. Even the ferocious Bear Lord and the cunning 10,000 Demons King were pinned in place by the divine aura, which far exceeded their comprehension. Their huge eyes were full of astonishment and instinctive terror. The younger spirit beasts, those under 10,000 years old, who acted only on instinct, had long since lost their fury. They lay prostrate on the ground in dense heaps, trembling and emitting suppressed, desperate wails. Inside the golden tree, the earth-shattering collision that would decide the fate of countless lives reached its end. Tang San's trident and body had merged into a single divine sense form, channeling the full force and will of his sea god power in one indomitable strike. Where the golden light passed, it cleansed all corruption, as if true gods and devils themselves could be slain. But the power great annihilator, illusory moon, wielded transcended the world's normal laws, born from the edge of the universe. In the final instant, she did not hesitate to sacrifice the golden tree's origin to forcibly convert its vast life energy into pure destructive force. Her myriad manifestations of annihilation rose to a new, despair-inducing height. The dark orb she unleashed was as black as an abyss, seeming to devour all light. When it met the sea god's golden stream, there was no conventional explosion. Instead, it displayed a horrific trait, devouring and annihilation. Like an insatiable bottomless maw, it tore at and sucked in the sea god's divine force and life energy, inch by inch transforming and absorbing them into its own destruction. As one energy dwindled and the other grew, the once dazzling, unstoppable golden torrent visibly dimmed and withered. Its divinity was corrupted and assimilated. Under Tang San's gaze, disbelief and unwillingness writ plain. His all-out strike was swallowed whole and utterly consumed by that black orb. The seed of destruction contracted, nearly halving in size, yet growing denser, emanating an ominous, eerie glow. It continued its momentum and struck his already exhausted divine sense form. There was no expected thunderous blast, only a dull, heart-stopping sound of energy erosion. Tang San's divine sense body went transparent and ethereal in an instant. Countless grotesque, purplish-black patterns, like living, virulent thorns, fanned across him, embedding themselves and fiercely eroding the core origin of his divine sense. He couldn't even cry out before his form disintegrated, inch by inch, within the annihilating darkness, turning into countless dim golden blue specks that finally vanished into the still roiling sea of life. The phantom of the sea god Trident gave one reluctant hum, then dissolved into nothing. Tang San's divine sense clone, sea god Tang San, was completely wiped out, body and soul annihilated. "Little San!" From afar, Yin, driven back by the battle wave, cried out. Her steady blue divine light flickered wildly from shock, nearly collapsing. She surged to rush toward where her son had vanished, but Huanlong flicked her aside with a casual motion. An incomparably dense, purplish-black restraining shackle sprang into being, binding her from head to toe and stifling even a breath. Helpless, she watched her son's divine sense clone erased, her crystal blue eyes filled with powerlessness. Her refining process was violently interrupted by the shock and Huanlong's interference. The golden tree's instinctive will rebounded on her, and her divine sense dimmed to the brink of collapse. "Ha! Ha!" Huanlong stood at the center of the sea of life and laughed, a proud, triumphant sound. She spread her arms as if to embrace the boundless life force, now bereft of its last guardian. Thanks to Yin's 10,000 years of continuous refining and assimilation, and the voluntary integration of the souls and powers of successive Sea God Pavilion Masters of Shrek Academy, the Golden Tree's development of independent consciousness had long been stifled, reduced to a primitive, pure life instinct. A core that acted only on instinct, no matter how high its life level or vast its energy, offered even less resistance to a great annihilator like Huanlong, who specialized in mental erosion and energy transformation, than Yin had when refining it. What magnificent, intoxicating life power. What a perfect foundation, Huanlong murmured, drunk on it. Now it belongs to me. She no longer hesitated. A vast, pure will to destroy surged forth, desperately eroding, polluting, and assimilating the golden tree's core origin. A colossal phantom of the tree of destruction loomed behind her, having found perfect parasitic soil. Countless thick, dark roots plunged into the sea of life like ravenous vampires, sucking in near-infinite life energy and converting it into ever more terrifying annihilation. Purplish-black patterns of decay radiated from her like a spreading plague. Wherever they touched, the once dazzling golden green changed to desolation and wither. The sacred, warm aura of life was covered and devoured by a cold, despairing will of destruction. The tree's internal space slid swiftly from life's holy ground toward the abyss. Outside, those remaining on Sea God Island watched in horror as the towering golden blue pillar was swallowed and replaced by an ominous purplish-black glow. The golden tree that had borne Shrek Academy's 10,000 years of glory and faith visibly lost its luster and vitality. Lush leaves withered and fell to ash. The thick trunk shriveled gray and cracked, as if forced through tens of thousands of years of decay in an instant, hurtling toward death. And the suffocating, bone-deep pressure of destruction rose like a tangible mountain, crushing spirit power and leaving only bone-chilling cold and endless despair. Sea God. The Sea God's aura. It's gone. Yan Xiaozhe's face drained of color. He muttered as if the faith that had sustained his life had been destroyed, leaving emptiness in his eyes. It's over. Shrek, 10,000 years of foundation. Everything is over. Old Master Lin sank to his knees, turbid tears tracing wrinkled cheeks carved by endless grief. Just as despair reached its peak, the golden tree, nearly blackened, shuddered violently. An incomparably massive purplish-black halo condensed around it, a skirt of pure destructive energy spreading silently but swiftly from the tree's heart. That halo had no aim but termination itself. It embodied indiscriminate annihilation. Sea God Island and all life upon it were the first to bear the blow. No one could issue more than a strangled cry. The moment the purplish-black halo touched them, bodies disintegrated and dissolved into the finest black dust, like paper dropped into strong acid. Souls were erased along with the flesh, their imprints vanished. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The destructive halo expanded outward at a pace that seemed slow, yet was utterly irresistible. Chapter 346. Destroyer star waves of destruction rolled like a black ocean, swallowing every living thing in their path. Inside Shrek Academy, the remaining teachers, their faces white with terror, stumbled through the motions and triggered the Academy's buried, combined spirit tool defense array. A vast, multicolored energy shield tried to rise and make one last stand. But this shield, the pinnacle of Shrek Academy's spirit tool engineering, was as fragile as a soap bubble against an aura of annihilation suffused with the great Lord of Annihilation's will. The moment they met, the shield didn't manage even a ripple. It gave a pained, keening cry and shattered into a scatter of tiny lights, vanishing without a trace. Shrek Academy, it's over. Wang Yan, a teacher who had devoted his life to the theory of spirits and had been kept from the front line because he was no fighter, pushed up his signature black-rimmed glasses. He stared at the oncoming tide. Fear flickered in his eyes, but what dwarfed it was the raw unwillingness and regret of a scholar robbed of his work. So much of the ocean of spirit knowledge remained unexplored. He could not accept an end like this. No, hold the line. Beside him, the hard-tempered, sharp-edged Zhou Yi screamed and hurled her spirit power into the nearest spirit tool base as if possessed. All the teachers who remained were like fish floundering on a drying shoal, making desperate, futile gestures. Survival instinct contorted their faces into masks of panic and collapsing despair. But the mechanics of annihilation do not care for the struggles of ants. The purple-black aura swept forward with steady, irresistible cruelty. Whether Wang Yan's reason, Zhou Yi's frenzy, or anyone else's frantic motions, everything froze in an instant. In the next heartbeat, their bodies, the buildings around them, even the ground beneath their feet, disintegrated silently like sand sculptures struck by wind, turned into a nothingness of black particles and blown away. The wave of destruction had devoured the heart of Shrek Academy. And it did not stop there. After consuming Sea God Island and Shrek Academy, the purple-black tide kept expanding from the golden tree at the city's center, as if intent on erasing Shrek City, the 10,000-year-old bastion, from the map. Sturdy walls, soaring houses, crowded streets, citizens and spirit masters who had not escaped because they trusted the Academy's safety, all were reduced to nothing the moment the aura touched them. Existence, fear, hope, everything collapsed into non-being. In a few breaths, more than two-thirds of Shrek City had been leveled. Where the continent's first academy had stood, there was only a blank void smoldering with black smoke. No, this can't be real. Yan Xiaozhe, Kai Meier, Old Lin, Shi Xing. Every senior official and powerhouse left in Shrek stared like hollow shells at the place where the academy had been, now a sea of silent, purple-black ruin. Reflected in their eyes was utter despair, heart-rending grief at their homeland being erased. Their sacred ground, the thing they had sworn to protect, had become endless void. The golden tree itself had been stained pitch black, emitting monstrous, malign chi. Then the pitch-black giant tree erupted with a terrifying, all-consuming light. Its huge form convulsed, twisted, contracted, and reformed. Trunk and branches writhed and reorganized as if alive, until they coalesced into a tall, eerie female figure, suffused with a cold, deathly stillness. She opened her eyes, and within them flickered ruthless purple-black flames, as if they could freeze all life in the world. "This body is acceptable." Huanlong's voice sounded, not a mere mental fluctuation, but a voice occupying a physical vessel in the material world. The tone carried an evil resonance that made souls shiver. Then this tiresome farce should end. A lazy, cruel smile curved her lips as she looked down at the ruined city, already a living hell, but still dotted with occasional desperate resistance and piteous cries. She regarded it like a painting not yet fully stained with blood. "The stubborn resistance of ants can be so annoying," she murmured, and the words hung in the awful stillness. She raised an arm, huge, formed of the golden tree's life energy, and pointed toward the starry void. From her palm came an indescribable, terrifying gravitational force, the compulsion of the law of destruction itself. It was not attraction in any ordinary sense, it pulled at existence. High above the clouds, space itself groaned and cracked. From the shadowed edge of Douluo Star, where fragments and remnants drifted, a colossal meteorite, nearly 1,000 meters across, the remainder of a shattered small planet, was torn free of its orbit and yanked through the rift by that brutal, destructive force. Dark and iron-like, its pitted surface bore the scars of impact and cooled lava. Huanlong's torrent of purple-black energy leapt out and wrapped that celestial remnant like a fevered hand. The energy did more than cloak it. It seeped in, corroded, and remolded it. The remnant's surface blackened. Its material was compressed and reshaped under the law of destruction until it became incomparably hard and dense. Hot, dark red destructive sigils began to race across it, as if a furnace of annihilation had been lit inside. Countless smaller fragments, cosmic dust, and other captured meteorites were drawn to it like tributaries to a river, swelling its bulk. It grew into an irregularly shaped, dark red and black burning mass, far longer and wider than 1,000 meters. Wherever it passed, space twisted and collapsed, leaving a blurred, void-like trail and a low roar that battered the soul. This destroyer star, saturated with pure malice and the will of finality, plummeted from tens of thousands of meters, unstoppable, straight for the already half-ruined Shrek City. Its vast shadow blotted out the last of the sky, laying a suffocating shroud of death over the wreckage. What is that?" The remaining city guards looked up, spirit tools slack in their hands, faces drained of blood and life. "Is it a heavenly punishment?" someone cried. One man's spirit utterly broke. He collapsed, shuddering and bereft of control. Survivors, human and spirit beast alike, felt the destructive will lock onto the area, freezing their souls, and smelled the hot, fetid odor of annihilation rushing toward them. "Why is this happening? What did my Shrek Academy do to deserve this?" Yan Xiaozhe watched the star drop from the heavens, a rain of fire and meteorites trailing behind it, and let out a bitter, hollow laugh. Faced with a beast tide they had sometimes fought to the death, but facing Huanlong, a demon of world-ending destruction beyond any understanding, a force like an incarnation of natural disaster, there seemed only one option: close one's eyes and wait. As destruction descended, Tidal Douluo, like Yan Xiaozhe and the city's defenders, could only stare in blank despair at the ever-growing harbinger of doom. Then, in that absolute silence, Yan Xiaozhe's fear and confusion vanished. In their place flared a desperate, resolute acceptance. He turned to Team Douluo Shi Xing, who stood as stunned as everyone else, and roared, an anguished cry that carried his final hope and charge. Under the incredulous eyes of all, Yan Xiaozhe's body burst into holy light. He transformed into a blazing phoenix, wings of pure golden flame unfurling, and without hesitation tore toward the destroyer star, flapping against the destructive surge like a moth drawn to a flame. Xiaojie, no! Tai Meier gave a mournful cry, tears blurring her sight. Old Lin, Old Zhuang, Gong Changlong, and others snapped out of their stupor to watch that golden streak fly toward the catastrophe, their faces full of grief and helplessness. Yan Xiaojie's reckless act did more than rouse his companions. It caught the attention of Huan Long, who looked on from her lofty place in the void. She watched the tiny golden light with amusement, an upward curl at the corner of her mouth. She had seen this kind of thing too many times. Among the countless civilizations she had erased, brave, self-sacrificing figures always appeared, trying to overturn fate with faith and courage. Before the great Lord of Annihilation, before the power of the Antimatter Legion, all such struggles were futile. Destruction was their inexorable end. Chapter 347, A Flash of Hopelessness. Boom! As the radiant phoenix dove toward the base of the Star of Annihilation, it condensed every scrap of spirit power, every thread of life, even the origin of its soul. Its whole being became a tiny sun, burning with blinding intensity as if trying to push back the dark. Terrifying fluctuations of energy rippled outward. Then, as Yanshao's soul core, the vessel of his entire lifetime of cultivation, collapsed and detonated, a thunderous explosion like a nuclear blast rolled across the world. The destructive force of his self-detonation, like the death throes of a star, blossomed into a rapidly expanding golden sphere that struck the plummeting Star of Annihilation. Boom! For a heartbeat, the unstoppable fall of the star was checked by that life-sacrificing blast. The hardened rock layers of its surface cracked, countless tiny fissures spidering outward, and scores of attached fragments were shaken loose. That was all it accomplished. Yan Xiaojie's sacrifice was magnificent and brilliant, but too brief. Against a kilometer-wide star that carried divine-rank destruction, his light was a single spark in an endless, devouring darkness, glorious for an instant, then utterly consumed. A moth circling a flame was still only a moth. Huanlong watched unmoved. Although she had just taken the golden tree as her physical body, her essential rank far surpassed this world. By the rules of the Douluo Continent, she had already ascended to a god position. As the core of the Douluo star plane, she was a genuine first-rank divinity with a divine force rank well over 120. And that was only the beginning. This was merely her initial memory body acquisition, not yet fully assimilated. Given time, her divine force would climb at terrifying speed, breaking the 150 rank barrier and reaching the God King realm. That was the terrifying foundation of the Great Lord of Annihilation. Even as a memory body, her power was utterly beyond mortal reach. How could the self-detonation of a super Douluo possibly stop a first-rank divinity? The Star of Annihilation only paused for a moment and then resumed its merciless fall, more violent than before, toward the lands below. The true end had come. Xiaojie, I understand. Kai Meier wept, grief almost drowning her, but beneath the heartache a clear, resolute realization rose. She understood Yan Xiaojie's last look. It was not merely desperation, but a final entrustment and hope. The vice dean of the spirit department, his wife, flared with spirit power like a burning star. She became a resolute arrow, following the fading path of her husband's light straight toward the sky-obscuring Star of Annihilation without hesitation. Boom! Another blazing sun burst into being. The heat and grandeur of Kai Meier's soul core detonation rivaled Yan Xiaojie's. The light seemed to hold all her tenacity, love, reluctance, and her final furious cry. Still, before the kilometer-wide star, even this brilliant swan song only stalled the descent for a breath. The exploding energy scattered like waves against a reef, wasted, swallowed, annihilated. Ha ha! Am I getting old? Afraid of death more than the young? Ridiculous. Old Lin's ancient, relieved laugh cut through the sorrow. Verdant light, fierce and overflowing with life, shot into the sky like a river defying the current, clashing headlong with death. Ha ha! Shrek Academy! Beast King Douluo Gong Changlong is here! Gong Changlong, with his fiery mane and primitive bearing, bellowed an earth-rending dragon roar. His body turned into a ferocious crimson dragon that streaked upward, wildness and rebellion blazing as he hurled his last life into the heavens. Xixing, you're still young. Take the children and leave. Don't let our sacrifice be for nothing. Old Zhuang, usually gentle, a titled Douluo from the healing system, now wore an expression of solemn resolve. He stared at Xixing and gave his final command, then let a pure healing luminance erupt around him. This time, the light was not for healing, but to wholly ignite his cultivated soul core. Though not practiced in offense, his afterglow could still flame into brilliance that would light the sky. Shanliner stared in the direction of Yan Shaoji's detonation until the light vanished, then turned slowly toward Qian Duoduo's cold, ruined body in the distance. Past grievances, loves, hatreds, disputes, everything fell away like dust. A bone-deep calm and relief settled over her. With time running out as she burned her life away, she let the last of her attachments harden into resolve. Duo, wait for me, she whispered, then became a roaring azure flame dragon, its cry carrying liberation and unshakable determination, and shot into the sky. As soon as Huanlong had conjured the star and unleashed its world-destroying pressure, even the vicious beasts, Xiangjun and the 10,000 demons king among them, had been terrified into retreat, scrambling to flee the terrifying epicenter. But Xiangjun, fleeing in panic, suddenly felt a cold gaze and turned. What he saw were human powerhouses, with a determination he could not fathom, throwing themselves one after another into the star of annihilation like moths to flame. Even he, a cruel beast, felt something like shock and a complicated, reluctant admiration. BG watched with emerald eyes full of emotion. A rare pacifist among spirit beasts, though hostile to humans, she could not help but admire the courage shown by the Shrek powerhouses, the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect those behind them. Perhaps this was why humans rose, because in desperate moments their souls burned brightest. Watching Old Lin, Old Zhuang, Xianliner, and Gong Changlong stride to their deaths, Xixing's mind was shaken and his soul trembled. His spirit, the spatial temporal silver disk, made him the most likely to escape. His instinct told him to run, but a bitter smile hardened into unwavering resolve. "Burn!" he roared. The spatial temporal silver disk above his head erupted with an unprecedented silver brilliance. He poured every last scrap of life and the origin of his soul into it. His hair grayed before their eyes, his skin dulled, but he did not care. Space violently trembled as silver spatial power unfurled like a tide, precisely enveloping all the remaining Shrek Inner Court disciples led by Wu Ming. City Lord Xixing, Wu Ming and the others, feeling themselves wrapped in that spatial field, snapped out of despair and stared in astonishment. "Go!" Xixing's voice was hoarse from the strain, but firm. "You are Shrek's last seeds of hope. Live. Shrek's future depends on you." Only by burning his life and soul could he push the spatial temporal silver disk to such extremes. Only then could he perform ultra-long-range teleportation for so many people and give them a sliver of hope to escape certain death. "No, City Lord Xixing, we won't go. We will live and die with the Academy." Wu Ming's eyes went red as she cried out. Shrek was their home. How could they abandon it? "This is an order." Xixing formed the seals, his face twisted in agony as he forced out one last burst of power. "Go find Old Xuan and rebuild Shrek." Under their tearful, red-rimmed gazes, a silver light enveloped Wu Ming and the others. Space tore. The silver flash blinked out. On the city wall, the Inner Court's elite disciples vanished without a trace. Only the bewildered, battered city defense soldiers remained, and Xixing, completely spent, aged as if his lamp had been burned down to its husk. He had given everything. Even if he lived, his life was nearly over. "Sorry, this is all I can do." Xixing looked at the generals and soldiers who had followed him for years, eyes full of apology. "No, City Lord, no need for apologies." His trusted adjutant shook his head, gaze fixed up at the resolute figures hurling themselves into the sky. "We are willing to live and die with Shrek." If even the titled Douluo and Super Douluo adults chose to die heroically, what fear had they as soldiers? To die by a divinity's hand could be a kind of honor. Xixing heard it, smiled bitterly, and said no more. He could not save everyone, but he had saved a chance. Gathering a final trickle of spirit power, he turned into a faint silver light and shot upward, catching up with Xianliner and the others. In this moment of absolute expenditure, a bottleneck that had stalled him for years finally loosened. His spirit rank rose by one. But the breakthrough felt hollow, dwarfed by the price it cost. Boom, boom, boom. High above, suns detonated one after another. Old Lin's verdant light, Old Zhuang's pure radiance, Shanliner's azure flame storm, Gong Changlong's crimson dragon roar, Shi Xing's final spatial annihilation. 5 powerful souls ignited their cores and detonated in unison at different altitudes, roaring into the dark. End of this chapter. Chapter 348, Shrek's Fall. Xianliner and the others, accepting death with a calm desperation, detonated their spirit cores. A terrifying surge of energy ripped through the void realm. The pitch-black spatial rifts, like the open maw of a giant beast, swallowed most of the meteoric fire that rained down with the Star of Destruction. Even so, facing the 1,000-meter remnant of the Star of Destruction, empowered by Huanlong's divine force, and carrying the last elegy woven from the lives and souls of several Douluo. Titled Douluo and a super Douluo, the rifts could only make surface cracks multiply and delay its fall by a few more breaths. It was tragic and yet utterly powerless. Huanlong hovered high above the void realm, one hand raised in an elegant, beckoning gesture, like a cold conductor, appreciating a final movement of despair and sacrifice. She watched the Star of Destruction, born of her will, crushing all resistance, with eyes full of cruel, joyful amusement. Destruction is unstoppable. Here. Huanlong's cold, emotionless voice sounded like the final judgment, echoing deep within the souls of every survivor. The Star of Destruction, burning with dark red and pitch-black flames, brazenly tore through the last barrier of the atmosphere and suddenly accelerated to unimaginable speed. The violent friction with the air threw off an intense, ominous crimson glow that felt chilling, like congealed blood. It ends. Her massive palm, composed of 2 opposing forces, destruction and life, remained poised. With a casual downward press, she flipped the switch on the world's end. The Star of Destruction struck with unerring precision at the very heart of Shrek City, the former site of Sea God Island and the Sea God Pavilion, the symbol of the Academy's glory and faith. For a single frozen frame, time seemed to stop. All sound, color, and motion in the world held absolute stillness, centered on the point where the star met Earth. Then a shockwave unlike any earthly word could describe spread outward from the impact point. Not an explosion, but annihilation, a perfect, continuously expanding sphere of pure erasure that rolled out in every direction at incomprehensible speed. Remaining towers, spirit tool fortifications carved with defensive runes, the still wailing and struggling lives, burning debris, down to the solid earth that had cradled 10,000 years of civilization, dissolved, layer by layer, at the molecular level, into primordial nothingness. Like fragile paper in an incinerator, they vanished before that pure wave of destruction. There was no roar of fire, no towering flames, only a silence that froze the soul, an absolute non-existence. In an instant, Shrek City was replaced by a vast, bottomless circular crater. Its edges were unnaturally smooth, as if polished by a divine craftsman. The rock and soil instantaneously melted by unimaginable heat and pressure, and then rapidly cooled into glassy layers. Only then came the delayed, tsunami-like aftershock, sweeping the surrounding land with crushing force, leveling distant ruins and terrain that had escaped the first wave. Tremors radiated for thousands of miles from the impact, as if the entire Douluo Continent's plates were crying out in pain. 10,000 years of legacy, Shrek City's history, glory, sorrow, struggles, loves, and hatreds were wiped from the world's map. In its place remained a monstrous sinkhole that exhaled twisted black smoke and a heavy aura of destruction, its glassy rim silently telling of the unimaginable catastrophe. Huanlong withdrew her hand with the satisfied detachment of one savoring destructive feedback and the collapse of faith. "Clean," she said flatly, as if brushing dust from her shoulder. Her strikes range, indifferent to friend or foe, extended far beyond the city. The spirit beast army that had surrounded Shrek City, densely stationed for generations, suffered the same sudden, inexplicable ruin falling from the heavens. Where the destructive sphere passed, countless century and millennia-old spirit beasts vaporized without a sound. Tens of thousands of souls returned to the void realm in silence. There was not even a single wail. The subsequent scorching airwave and the deadly dust charged with annihilative energy brought a second merciless cleansing. Those spirit beasts further out, spared the initial erasure, were ignited by unthinkable heat into screaming, thrashing fireballs that burned to charred bones within agonizing moments. Others inhaled the destructive dust. Their organs corroded and burned from within, dark blood flooding their mouths and noses as they convulsed and suffocated. The 10,000-year spirit beasts, relying on stronger bodies and deeper spirit power, held on a moment longer, roaring as they poured spirit power into protective shields, but those defenses were laughable before divine rank aftershocks. Shields shattered like soap bubbles, scales and fur were torn away, vast bodies were hurled and mangled through the air. Many fell with shattered bones and ruptured organs, barely alive. Survivors were riddled with spreading purplish-black wounds that prevented healing and devoured their life force like vicious maggots. Even the mighty vicious beasts appeared disoriented, overcome by a primitive, long-forgotten terror and an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. Biji, the benevolent jade swan, instinctively expanded her healing domain to its limits, sending emerald waves of life light to protect as many kin as she could. That act of mercy made her a target for the destructive energy. Her life light clashed with the purplish-black ripples and collapsed instantly. Biji felt as though Mount Tai themselves pressed on her chest. She coughed up blood tinged with black chi. Her magnificent jade wings blackened and lost their luster. She fell weakly from the sky, her aura greatly diminished. Her eyes were filled with a grief that had nothing to do with herself and everything to do with the countless lives that vanished before her. The 10,000 demons, King's vast underground root network, suffered catastrophic backlash. Destructive energy spread through the earth. Plant clones he controlled and even his origin roots withered, snapped, and turned to ash. Nearly half of the 100 or so eerie scarlet demon eyes dotting his main trunk burst from the impact. Dark green, blood-like sap spurted out as he gave a shrill mental shriek of pain and fury. His strength plummeted. He had sustained unprecedented damage. Xiangjun, the irritable dark gold dreadclaw bear, roared and swung his tear-sky claw, trying in vain to tear the shockwave apart. The power was beyond anything he had imagined. His vaunted defense, enough to face the Dragon Clan, was forcibly breached. Dark golden fur was peeled back, precious golden blood oozing from wounds. His massive frame rocked repeatedly. Internal injuries bled from his mouth as fear and despair invaded his usually fierce eyes for the first time. The Red King's 3 heads unleashed hellfire, but the flames were swept back and burned him instead. Large swaths of his hard reddish scales shattered and flaked away. His body was charred black. He crashed through a wide section of forest and lay collapsed, all 3 heads emitting agonized whimpers as he lost combat capability for the time being. Ziji's dark devouring attribute had almost no effect against this pure, absolute force. She was flung by the tumultuous energy. Purplish-black dragon scales peeled away like rain, cold dragon blood splattered across the sky, and she too suffered grievous injuries. When the Star of Destruction finally struck, the areas outside Shrek City that had been densely populated by spirit beasts had already been transformed into a silent, burnt wasteland, an inferno of scorched earth that smelled strongly of charring and blood. The rim of the great circular crater stretched for miles. The ground was a shattered mess, laced with spiderweb cracks and giant claw marks, the last desperate traces of powerful spirit beasts fighting in their death throes. End of chapter. On the vast plain, as if struck by a nuclear blast, only a deathly silence remained. Ranks of spirit beast corpses lay piled like hills. Many others had been completely obliterated, leaving no bodies at all. Charred limbs, shattered organs, blood-stained fur, and cold scales littered the ground. Those spirit beasts, grievously wounded but still alive, let out painful, desperate wails that sounded harsh and hollow across the ruined battlefield. The once surging tide of beasts was reduced to a few scattered survivors huddled at the edge, bereft of will to fight, their eyes full of raw, primal terror. The core strength the Stardew Great Forest amassed over countless years, the elites of countless tribes, had been slaughtered or shattered in this unprovoked disaster. The losses far outstripped anything they had suffered before, even compared to prior bloody clashes with Shrek City's defenders. Oh? A few slightly stronger ants still clinging on. Wan Long yawned lazily, as if she had just finished some trifling task. She casually extended a finger. At its tip, the terrifying purplish-black destructive energy condensed once more, honing in with perfect precision on the remaining vicious beasts. BG, Xiangjun, and the panic-stricken spirit beast remnants farther back. Her intent had been to utterly erase this city and everything ugly around it. The desperate self-detonations and interceptions by Yan Xiaozhe and the others had been tragic, but ultimately, like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, they had only shaved a sliver from the star remnant's power. That was why beasts like BG had survived instead of being reduced to ash. In a strange way, those humans' dying struggles had been the only reason. Feeling that terrifying energy, the gaze of death itself, condense and lock onto them again, BG's eyes went hollow with despair. Xiangjun let out a futile roar but could not move. The 10,000 demons, King's spirit trembled with fear. Every remaining spirit beast froze, bracing for the final, unavoidable end. The destructive fingertip began to drop. Buzz! From the depths of the life lake, the core of the Stardew Great Forest, a long-suppressed aura erupted with a roar as fierce as Huanlong's. A brilliant silver-purple light pillar blasted up through the lake's surface and into the sky, dyeing the heavens with majestic color. Within it, a dazzling silver figure tore through space. She folded the intervening void like a fragile curtain, crossing thousands of miles in an instant, and appeared above the devastated site of Shrek City, now a yawning, abyssal pit. She wore a silver gown that shimmered like moonlight, graceful yet regal. Her purple eyes were as clear as crystal, but now burned with boundless rage and an icy, soul-freezing killing intent. Her silver hair streamed behind her without wind, and the 7 primal elemental forces, water, fire, wind, earth, light, darkness, and space, swirled obediently around her as if she were their sovereign. Space itself twisted and collapsed slightly at her presence. She was the spirit beast co-dominator, the Silver Dragon King, Gu Yuena. By force of her strength, she had broken the strange seal Huanlong had formed around the life lake and had ripped through space to reach the battlefield. Below her lay the place where Shrek City had stood, now nothing but a black hole. Her spirit sensed Huanlong's malevolent aura, cold death and destruction. She saw Ditian frozen, vicious beasts like BG gravely wounded and dying, and the spirit beast army reduced to less than 1/10 of its former might. Every image seared into Guyuena's heart like a brand, igniting a fury that left her breathless with hatred. Manipulating Ditian, using my people, trampling life, you deserve 10,000 deaths, she snarled. She wasted no words, her purple eyes fixed on Huanlong as she raised a jade hand and with a single sweeping motion called the 7 basic elemental forces to converge. They merged and fused into a roaring torrent of chaotic energy, no longer merely overlapping, but reforming into a single, surging blade. That torrent, charged with Guyuena's absolute fury, slashed toward the destructive brilliance Huanlong had aimed at BG and the others. Boom! 2 divine-rank powers met head-on, and the sound was cataclysmic. The sky itself seemed rent open by an unhealing wound, revealing the roiling chaos of the void beyond. The shuddering earth cracked in spiderweb patterns. Shockwaves gouged new scars across the already ravaged land. Huanlong's new physical body, fashioned from the golden tree, swayed. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by playful excitement, as if she had found an unexpectedly entertaining toy. "Oh, you could actually break my seal? I underestimated you. You are indeed strong," she purred, her voice lazy but laced with condescension. Guyuena's figure trembled slightly. Solemnity hardened her features. In that single clash, she had read the opponent's difficulty. Huanlong's attribute was peculiarly destructive. She had taken the golden tree, Douluo Star's life core, as her physical body and energy source, granting her nearly limitless recovery and vitality. Guyuena herself had only just forced her way through the seal and had not yet regained full strength. A deathmatch now would be unpredictable, and more importantly, the spirit beast forces under Guyuena's command had already suffered grievous losses and could not sustain more. The 2 divine-rank titans had, in one exchange, learned each other's limits. Guyuena gave Huanlong a cold, withering look, then swept her senses over the devastated survivors. Less than 1 in 10 remained, and the great vicious beast stood wounded and listless. Decision made. All spirit beasts, heed my command. Her voice was not loud, but carried directly into the deepest part of every surviving soul. Cold, majestic, absolute. It crushed their fear and confusion with an iron will. Retreat, fall back to the Stardew Great Forest, now! She waved her hand again. A soft silver light like silk streamed out and enveloped the frozen body of Ditian and the heavy, motionless, vicious beasts. Xiangjun, BG, the 10,000 Demons King. The Silver Dragon King's might radiated outward, clearing away lingering destruction and protecting the surviving beasts as she prepared their escort. Huanlong did not pursue. She hovered above the abyssal pit and watched with the same composed, amused smile, as if the survivor's escape were only a minor diversion in a drama for her entertainment. She had only just acquired this new body with its infinite potential and needed time to adapt and fuse fully with it. Her chief aim had been accomplished. There was no need to gamble everything against a local powerhouse whose true state was uncertain. Light flickered, and Guyuena wasted no time. She gathered the major vicious beasts into a silver meteor of motion and tore through the sky back toward the Star Do Great Forest. The surviving beasts, traumatized by the star remnant and terrified of Huanlong, clung to this hope. Ignoring pain and exhaustion, wailing in confusion, they fled like a shattered dam toward the forest, leaving their dead behind amid endless devastation. Huanlong merely floated in the void, savoring the ocean-like life power and the destructive divine force she controlled through her new body. She overlooked the black hole that had replaced the ancient city, a small, amused smile playing at her lips. Shrek Academy destroyed by a beast tide. Heh. When this reaches the human world, it will be quite the news, she murmured, her gaze sweeping outward toward approaching reinforcements, many and weak, but coming from all directions. The former #1 academy on the continent, the iron bulwark against spirit beasts, the city with a 10,000-year legacy, had been reduced to dust and erased from Douluo Continent's map. From the distance, Guyuena's icy voice echoed faintly with promise and rage. Huanlong, for today's crimes, I will repay you 100-fold. Huanlong answered only with a light, scornful laugh. Her form blurred and dissolved like ink in water, vanishing silently into the distorted void, leaving behind a deathly silent abyss and terrifying waves that threatened to sweep the continent. What on earth happened here? In the distance, several streams of light of different colors tore through the sky and halted above the place where Shrek City had been. As they dispersed, several powerful figures materialized, their auras roaring, able to stride on the air. The leader, wearing the battle robe marked with the star crown of the Star Luo Empire's Imperial Priest Hall, was the Star Luo High Priest himself, level 98 Super Douluo, Sky Eagle Douluo Songying. His eagle-like gaze fixed on the scene below, his weathered face drained of color as horror and disbelief overtook him. What he saw was not a city ablaze and locked in battle, but an enormous, bottomless, pitch-black pit, its edges smooth like glazed glass, wreathed in black smoke and a deathly silence. Farther out, rock formations were melted into bizarre, glass-like shapes by unimaginable heat. It was an apocalypse made visible, a scene that told the story of a tragedy worse than anyone could have foreseen. Chapter 350, titled Douluo, with complicated emotions. It wasn't only Sky Eagle Douluo who was stunned. The giant hammer Douluo, the giant strength Douluo, and the shattered star Douluo, his companions and all-famed titled Douluo of the Star Luo Empire, looked as if their minds had been struck by a massive hammer. Color drained from their faces, pupils constricted, and they stood frozen in utter shock. The sight before them was apocalyptic and utterly incomprehensible. It delivered a single cruel truth. They had arrived far too late. They had come at the Emperor Shujiao's urgent order, leading the Empire's elite Spirit Master legions to reinforce Shrek Academy. The Academy's distress signal, sent through its highest-grade spirit communication device, had been clear. The beast tide was unprecedented, and Shrek City was in mortal danger. Sky Eagle Douluo had taken several titled Douluo to press ahead, while the main force of the Star Luo legions advanced at top speed behind them. Yet despite all that haste, what met them now offered no sign of a surviving city, only a void. Before Sky Eagle and the others could fully process it, several powerful spiritual presences approached. The Star Luo titled Douluo snapped out of their daze, their spirit power rising reflexively. When they saw who had arrived, they relaxed only a little. Their faces remained grave. The newcomers were not enemies but familiar rivals and counterparts, the imperial priests of the Tianhun Empire and the chief imperial priest of the Dueling Empire. Among them was the level 97 Super Douluo Tianyang. As High Priest of the Star Luo Empire, Sky Eagle Douluo had long dealings with the top powerhouses of Tianhun and dueling. They all knew each other well. Sky Eagle, you got here first. What exactly happened? Where is Shrek City? Where's the beast tide? Demanded a tall, thin, titled Douluo from the Tianhun Empire, his voice trembling with disbelief and horror as his gaze swept the ghastly chasm below and the empty sky above. There was no trace of a beast tide, only silence and the blackened remains of devastation. Though Shrek Academy lay within Tianhun's borders in name, it had always been effectively autonomous. The Stardew Great Forest sits at the central border of the continent's old tripartite, Tianhun, Star Luo, and Dueling, and Shrek City guarded that gateway. In sheer distance, the capitals of Tianhun and Dueling were farther away than Star Luo City, which explained why Sky Eagle and his men had arrived first. When the Academy sent out its plea, all three empires had responded without hesitation, dispatching their strongest forces under top-titled Douluo. Everyone understood the catastrophe that would follow if Shrek fell, and yet, even the closest reinforcements had been too late. Song Ying, Sky Eagle Duo, kept his face grim as if the world had been turned inside out. He shook his head slowly, his voice dry and heavy. Tianyang, don't ask. We were rushing as fast as we could. We saw. He gestured toward the black abyss below. His hand trembled slightly. We saw this. Shrek City has vanished from the map. A collective gasp escaped nearly all the titled Douluo when they took in the scene. The chill that ran up their spines could have frozen blood. These were veteran powerhouses hardened by 1,000 storms, but none had ever witnessed such an aftermath, silent, absolute, like divine retribution. Those are spirit beast remains, in terrifying quantities, Song Ying said, his voice husky. He and Tianyang exchanged a grave look before they began to lead everyone down carefully into the abyss to investigate. The ground around them was scorched and vitrified, suffused with oppressive, corrosive energy that set their teeth on edge. Scattered among the blackened earth were human remains, charred beyond recognition, and an immense number of spirit beast corpses. Some young, some centuries old, even some 10,000-year behemoths. Most were shattered, burned, or grotesquely eroded by some unknown force. The spirit beast losses, by the looks of it, were even greater than the human ones. The beast tide did happen, Tianyang murmured, kneeling and touching the fused ground. He frowned at the lingering heat and destructive qi. But judging from how the remains are spread and their condition, the spirit beast army took horrific casualties, perhaps worse than the human side. Beneath their shock and sorrow, however, a small, ugly emotion began to stir. One they had long suppressed. Among the high-ranking Tianhun imperial priests, and even one of the dueling delegates, flickers of a different feeling, relief, almost joy, showed for a heartbeat in their eyes before they forced it into hiding. The annihilation of Shrek City meant the disappearance of a singular transcendent power that had occupied a peculiar, uncomfortable place in the politics of the three great empires for millennia. Sky Eagle stood silent at the rim of the abyss, wind gnawing at his beard and hair. The initial shock had not yet faded, but he felt a complex, shameful lightening of his heart, an easing of a burden he had never admitted to carrying. For generations, Shrek Academy had been a power that answered to no single empire, a nation within a nation. Its 10,000-year prestige, its sea god pavilion's terrifying might, and its vast alumni network had placed it above the three empires in influence. The imperial families of the three great empires accepted this publicly because Shrek had the moral high ground and enormous popular support. The Shrek Monitoring Group had even judged and punished nobles, sometimes bypassing imperial procedure, and more often than not, the evidence stood. But politics is politics. No ruler likes a rival that sits at the heart of his territory while answering to no one. For centuries, the imperial families had kept a wary distance, an unspoken rule forbidding their core heirs from studying at Shrek Academy, so that the Academy's influence could never penetrate the most intimate circles of imperial power. 4,000 years ago, when Shrek rallied nations against the Sun Moon Empire, its ability to unite forces across borders had left an unforgettable mark on the rulers of the three great empires. That kind of cohesion, transcending nations and crowns, was a threat no monarch could ignore. So they had learned to cooperate with Shrek, to rely on its strength, but never to let it touch the Empire's core. Now, that mountain of pressure that had rested on their chests for 10,000 years appeared to have been torn away in an instant. "It can be confirmed," Song Ying said at last, his tone deep and steady. He straightened and let his gaze sweep over the abyss that yawned like an entrance to hell. Finally, he looked to the place where the golden tree, the ancient symbol of Shrek's foundation, had once stood. The spot was empty. Shrek City has been completely annihilated. Even the ancient golden tree is gone. End of chapter. Chapter 351, Frightening Speculation. After a painstaking, highly detailed investigation, several top-titled Douluo from the three great empires, relying on rich experience and keen perception, had roughly reconstructed the remnants of this nightmarish battlefield. The conclusion was suffocating. That great city, the 10,000-year-old city, lauded as the continent's foremost, had been physically wiped from existence. They also found dozens of frantic spirit beast flight paths leading toward the Stardew Great Forest, and countless carcasses along the way, clear confirmation that a beast tide had occurred and that it had suffered terrible losses. The only thing we still can't determine is whether Phoenix Douluo Yan Xiaojie, Martial God Douluo Xian Liner, and Oolong Douluo Qian Duoduo are alive or dead, Sky Eagle Douluo said, his voice carrying a faint exhaustion and regret. And more importantly, how did this apocalypse happen? Tianyang Douluo frowned deeply, his face solemn. He knelt, scooped a handful of charred soil threaded with strange energy, examined it carefully, and let it fall through his fingers. "Could this be a level 9 fixed installation soul guidance cannonball?" he murmured. "But that doesn't make sense. Apart from the Sun Moon Empire, none of the three great empires possess strategic-level superweapons like that, and the spirit beasts of the Stardew Great Forest certainly wouldn't." He stood and surveyed the boundless ruin, his voice growing grave. "Look at the scale and the pristine nature of the destruction. To completely erase Shrek City and its defense system so thoroughly, leaving no vegetation and producing this almost annihilative effect, would require at least 50 level 9 fixed installation soul guidance cannonballs detonating at a single point. That's impossible." A titled Douluo from the dueling empire let out a dry, nervous laugh, trying to cut the oppressive silence. "It can't be that Shrek Academy itself used 50 level 9 fixed installation soul guidance cannonballs, can it?" His joke drew no response. The wind howled over the abyss. Everything else was deathly quiet. The Douluo who had spoken touched his nose and fell silent. The mood remained heavy. No one felt like laughing. Then, a titled Douluo from the Tianhun Empire spoke up, recalling something from earlier. "On the way here, we encountered many civilian convoys evacuating from the direction of Shrek City. When questioned, they said they'd received an urgent notice from Shrek Academy and were ordered to evacuate. They didn't know what had happened afterwards, only that alarms were blaring when they left and the distant energy fluctuations were terrifying." Tianyang stroked his chin. "Evacuating civilians. That means Shrek Academy's leadership at least foresaw the city might be indefensible and made worst-case preparations to save the people. If so, they must have a backup plan. The Academy's core strength, maybe there are still survivors." A glint of hope lit his eyes. "If we find survivors, perhaps we'll learn exactly what happened." "Search more carefully," Sky Eagle Douluo ordered in a low voice, his gaze razor-sharp as he scanned the air for lingering traces of energy. "Also pay attention to the remaining aura here. It's overpowering, full of pure destructive intent, and very odd." As the highest cultivated super Douluo present with the keenest perception, his impressions carried weight. He extended his hand. Faint spirit power flickered from his fingertips as he probed the subtle ripples that still drifted in the air. Confusion and unease darkened his face. "This doesn't match the residue from the explosion of any known spirit tool. There's no chaotic, mixed quality. Instead, it feels like an extreme, single-minded destructive power, almost like." He looked up into the deep sky, disbelief in his tone, like the impact of a giant meteor falling from above, imbued with a will to destroy. "How is that possible?" Tianyang almost blurted. He shook his head in disbelief. Even if a meteor fell, how could it strike Shrek City by such coincidence? And where are the fragments? Most meteor falls leave iron remnants. There should be traces. He pointed to the mirror-smooth, bottomless black abyss below and the charred, barren earth around it, as if some force had drained the origin of life. Look at this scene. There's no sign of a meteor crater, no scattered fragments, no newly activated mineral veins. It's unnaturally clean. Apart from destruction, nothing remains. He grew almost apologetic as he continued. It can't be that some entity conjured a meteor by hand, hurling it with perfect precision, and at impact, also annihilating the meteor itself, along with all of Shrek City down to the last speck. Could it? Tianyang glanced at the other titled Douluo, who shared his doubt, and shrugged. Frankly, it's pointless to speculate wildly here. Even the legendary divinity might not create such a clean, absolute annihilation. How could such a being exist on the Douluo Continent? It's meaningless for us to guess without facts, another voice said. Starluo Empire's Tiansha Douluo Huangjingshu lowered the communication spirit tool he'd been clutching. His face was unusually pale. His voice was low and rough. I just received word that our 3rd Spirit Master Legion's vanguard met a group of Shrek Academy survivors. By their clothing, they appear to be inner court disciples. They're being escorted by the Legion and are on their way here. Found them. Tianyang's brows rose, a flash of confidence in his eyes. I knew that a 10,000-year-old academy wouldn't be wiped out completely. There must be some spark left. The news brought relief. If survivors, especially core members like inner court disciples, were found, the mysteries of what had transpired might be solved. But no one noticed Huang Jingxu's gaze flick past the abyss again, nor the faint, almost overwhelming terror that crossed his face. His spirit, the peculiar Tiansha Lone Star, gave him an especially acute sensitivity to stellar power. At the edge of that desolate pit, he had clearly sensed 2 intertwined, soul-shaking energies. One, an unknown force filled with coldness, malice, and pure destructive intent, and the other, a vast, desolate stellar power, was terrifyingly familiar. In other words, Sky Eagle Dulo's seemingly absurd meteor guess was shockingly plausible. That realization chilled Huang Jingxu to the bone. There were no meteor fragments left. What did that mean? At the moment the meteor completed its destruction, it had itself been annihilated by some even more terrible power. This was not a natural disaster. The idea of an unknown entity able to control or even create meteors and perfectly harness their power made Huang Jingxu's blood run cold. Such methods were beyond his comprehension. Perhaps only a divinity of legend could achieve that. The Douluo Continent had not seen a true miracle in 10,000 years. He did not know how powerful a divinity might be. But he was certain of one thing. Even beast god Ditian, revered as the continent's strongest and the leader of the 10 great vicious beasts, did not possess the power to reshape the world and obliterate a city at will. If Ditian had such power, why would the spirit beast race cower in the Stardew Great Forest? Not long after, dense figures appeared on the horizon, several thousand of them. As they drew near, it became clear the Starluo Empire's Spirit Master Legion was escorting a group of young people, disheveled but with extraordinary bearing, toward the investigators. Leading them were Jinwu Holy Maiden Wu Ming, Chu Qingqian, Hua Yao, Mo Xuan, Ye Liu, and other surviving Shrek Inner Court disciples. Academy, is it, really, gone? Wu Ming's voice broke. When she and the others caught sight of the giant abyss, radiating an ominous death chi that had replaced their magnificent city, their legs gave out. Wu Ming dropped to her knees, the color draining from her face, stunned and bewildered. Chu Qingtian, Hua Yao, Mo Xuan, Ye Liu. Every inner court disciple who had survived was struck as if by lightning. Standing before the place that had been their home, they were overwhelmed by grief and disbelief beyond words. End of chapter. Chapter 352. Unbelievable Truth. Although Wu Ming and the others had feared the worst after City Lord Xixing's final words, seeing this cruel reality laid bare before them still shattered their defenses. Time Douluo Xixing had teleported them away at the cost of his life. They had narrowly escaped the abyss. Their hearts felt like ashes. All they wanted now was to honor the City Lord's last command and find Elder Xuan and the other Sea God Pavilion elders. Instead, as they fled, they ran into the Starluo Empire's 3rd Spirit Master Legion racing to their aid. The sight of a reinforcement army lit a faint spark of hope in their despair. They resolved to return to Shrek City with the Legion. Perhaps their teachers were still fighting. Perhaps there was still a chance. That slim hope was instantly crushed by the emptiness before them. Miss Wu Ming, please accept my condolences. Sky Eagle Douluo's figure shimmered, and he appeared beside Wu Ming, who was kneeling with a vacant, hollow expression. He didn't reach to lift her. Instead, he spoke in a deep, measured voice, touched with solemn comfort. A subtle surge of spirit power formed a gentle, protective field, rousing Wu Ming enough to keep her from collapsing entirely under the weight of grief. Other titled Douluo from the three great empires likewise gathered swiftly and silently. Their eyes swept over the ragged, blood-streaked survivors. Wu Ming, Chu Qingtian, Hua Yao, Mo Xuan, Ye Liu. Pale faces, torn academy uniforms, the chaotic residue of powerful spirit energy that still clung to them, each detail testified to the desperate battle they had endured. Senior Sister Wu Ming, pull yourself together. Chu Qingtian swallowed a sob and forced himself forward. His voice was hoarse but resolute. City Lord Shi Xing, Dean Yan, Elder Lin, Dean Xian, they used everything to get us out. They didn't do it for us to collapse here. We still carry their hopes and the duty to rebuild Shrek. Hua Yao, Mo Xuan, Ye Liu, and the others bit back their tears and straightened themselves, gathering around Wu Ming. Their eyes burned with sorrow and anger, but a steadier conviction, fueled by their teacher's sacrifices, struggled to push the despair back. They would not fall. Yan Xiaojie and the others had given their lives to let them escape. They could not squander that. Tianyang Duoluo stepped forward, voice urgent and grave. Wu Ming, you are the last eyewitnesses. Tell us plainly, what happened in Shrek City? What power caused this? Where are Yan Xiaojie, Elder Lin, and Shan Liner? Every titled Douluo present shared that need to know. Wu Ming looked up with tears streaming down her face. She bit her lip hard, tasting blood, using the pain to steady her mind. Around her, the titled Star Luo, Tianhun Dueling, held their breath, eyes fixed. She drew in the cold air that stank of dust and ruin, and in a voice tight with sobs but clear as a bell, each word soaked in anguish, she began to recount the brief, eternal nightmare. She told how the beast tide erupted without warning from the Star Du Great Forest, on an unprecedented scale, driven by almost all 10 vicious beasts in a frenzied assault. She described how City Lord Shi Xing stayed composed, organizing the city defenses and the Spirit Tool Master Legion to build bulwarks, and how deans and elders led by example, fighting to the end against the beasts. She told of the terrifying arrow that froze everything, how in an instant the peerless beast god Ditian became an ice sculpture. She spoke of the convulsions within the golden tree, where two monstrous clashes of energy ripped through the sky and earth, draining spirit power from all around. She named Dean Yan Shao, Vice Dean Kai Mayer, Elder Lin, Old Zhuang, Dean Shan Liner, and Senior Gong Changlong, how, one by one, to delay a dark star descending from the heavens as if intent on destroying the world, they resolutely ignited their spirit cores and self-destructed in brilliant, tragic sacrifice to buy the barest instant for others to flee. Finally, she described Team Douluo Xing, how he burned his remaining life and soul to activate the time-space silver disk and barely managed to send these inner court disciples out of that absolute death trap. Her narration broke often, choked by sobs. Chu Qingtian, Hua Yao, and the others, eyes raw, filled in details and confirmed the horrors. Their fragmented, tear-streaked account painted scenes of staggering loss and despair in the minds of every titled Douluo present. As she spoke, the faces of Sky Eagle Douluo, Tianyang Douluo, and the others shifted from solemnity to shock, then to near disbelief. Self-destructing spirit cores? Almost all of Shrek Academy's top powerhouses, including several Super Douluo and many titled Douluo, willingly blowing themselves up to delay a single attack? Freezing DTN? What being could do that? An unknown divine-rank conflict inside the Golden Tree, and a world-destroying star, summoned and controlled by someone? All of it sounded like a myth. If it weren't for the bottomless, deathly silent void before them, if the narrators weren't the Academy's closest inner disciples and multiple witnesses corroborating the story, anyone would think this a collective hallucination by traumatized survivors. You mean Shrek City and those titled Douluo were taken down by someone who can summon meteors out of the sky, control them, and destroy the whole city? Tianyang's voice trembled. He felt his understanding of the last century crumbling. Yes, Wu Ming whispered, closing her eyes. Tears still fell as she nodded hard, etching the image into her bones. We were teleported out, but in that last moment we all saw the figure. She summoned the star, she destroyed everything we had. Hatred laced her words, but she could not say who that figure was, human or beast, where she came from, or what her motives were. Everything remained a mystery. Yet, combined with the massive beast tide, almost all Shrek survivors instinctively held the spirit beasts of the Stardew Great Forest accountable for this unimaginable blood debt. A cold shudder ran through all the titled Douluo, even seasoned veterans like Sky Eagle and Tian Yang. Manipulating extraterrestrial meteors and annihilating a city with a thought, this exceeded their comprehension of power. It was godlike, the stuff of legend. How could a spirit beast reach such a level? Who is she? Tianyang shook his head. Rationally, he rejected that explanation, but the beast tide and Shrek's destruction were facts he couldn't deny. It's too early to jump to conclusions, Sky Eagle said, forcing calm and analysis despite his furrowed brow. Look around. How many spirit beasts died? The casualty count among them might even exceed that of the defenders. Too many suspicious, illogical points cloak this incident. Even as he spoke, he felt the weight of the catastrophe. Whether the truth was an unknown conspiracy or something worse, humanity had to respond. The fall of Shrek City would inevitably drive a violent counterattack against the spirit beasts. That was the political and social calculus. Revenge would be demanded, and hatred would blind reason. Even if this were the work of some unknown manipulator, it was a precise, cruel plan. Destroy the fulcrum that kept the continent's balance for 10,000 years and watch humanity and spirit beasts tear each other apart. An existence capable of effortlessly annihilating Shrek had appeared. Its stance was unknown, its purpose unknown, and its power enough to make every master on the continent tremble. The sky over Douluo Continent was about to change. Classify everything that happened here as top priority and send it back to the governments at maximum speed, Sky Eagle ordered, recovering first from the shock. He addressed the Star Luo Spirit Master Legion's officers, his tone grave and urgent. Inform His Majesty and recommend that the Empire immediately activate the highest state of war readiness. Mobilize all reconnaissance to watch the Stardew Great Forest closely. Report any anomalies instantly. Tianan Empire personnel, obey my order. Transmit this intelligence and advise your nation to enter Level 1 combat alert. Dueling Empire personnel, do the same. Send this with the highest priority and put your countries on emergency footing. Chapter 353, Actions of the Three Empires. Tianyang Douluo and the representatives of the Tianhun Empire issued almost identical orders to their subordinates at the same time, faces grave. For the moment, the powerhouses of the three great empires set aside their rivalries, calculations, and enmities. Stunned by a disaster that far exceeded comprehension, they instinctively chose the single most urgent response, self-preservation, and above all, quickly uncovering the true identity of the mysterious attacker. Miss Wu Ming and all the young friends from Shrek. Sky Eagle Duo turned his gaze to Wu Ming and the others, his tone softening with a touch of restrained consolation. The residual aura of destruction here is extremely strong, and the energy is chaotic. That's very unfavorable for your injuries to recover. For now, please return to Star Luo City with us so you can be cared for properly. Your safety is our top priority, and we need to question you more thoroughly about the specifics of the enemy. He knew well that with Shrek Academy's backbone shattered, Wu Ming and the others were vulnerable and isolated. Yet he did not show the slightest neglect. Sea God Pavilion Master Xuanzi, several Sea God Pavilion elders, and many elite inner court disciples still lived and were in Mingdu. The core seeds of Shrek Academy had not been completely severed. Although the three great empires welcomed the weakening of Shrek Academy in such a strange and dangerous time, letting Shrek be completely uprooted would create catastrophic instability in the continent's power structure. Wu Ming, Chu Qingqian, and the others exchanged glances, grief and unwillingness etched on their faces at leaving their homeland, stained with their teacher's blood and the Academy's glory. But they also understood the reason in Sky Eagle Douluo's words. With tears in their eyes, they cast one last, lingering look toward the endless abyss of annihilation, then nodded heavily. Shrek City, annihilated. Inside the imperial palace of Luo City, Shujiawei received Sky Eagle Duolo's intelligence via a special spirit communication tool at the earliest opportunity. When he learned that the beast tide had withdrawn and Shrek City had been utterly annihilated, the usually composed emperor inadvertently knocked a glazed teacup off the table. Warm tea spread a dark brown stain across the expensive velvet carpet, silently mirroring his tangled emotions. Sunlight through the carved lattice cast patterns of light and shadow across his handsome, imposing face, but it could not pierce the dark pool in his eyes. In that pool surged regret and sorrow, and, he had to admit to himself, a quiet relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. As the emperor of the Luo Empire, Shu Jiawei's feelings toward Shrek Academy were uniquely complicated. In his youth, he had concealed his identity and hidden among Shrek students. During those passionate years, he had learned profound spirit master techniques and theories, and he had developed a sincere attachment to the academy. Even after ascending the throne, in quiet moments between state affairs, he would sometimes recall training on Shrek's vast grounds, the shimmer of Sea God Lake, and the faces of classmates who once trained and drank beside him. But decades of imperial life had tempered and distanced that friendship. He knew better than anyone that he was first and foremost the monarch of the Luo Empire, responsible for the fate of hundreds of millions. Only secondarily was he an alumnus with fond memories. The annihilation of Shrek Academy shattered the balance that had been maintained on the Douluo Continent for millennia. The old order had collapsed, and a new arrangement was beginning to rise. He had already laid a bet for that new arrangement. Through Sujuju, the Star-Crowned sect had established ties with Sea Abyss City and placed an early wager on the dark horse Lu Jingming. Your Majesty, Sky Eagle Douluo also reports a small number of inner court disciples survived. He asks whether they should be brought back to Luo City for protection. The guard commander whispered, careful not to disturb the emperor's thoughts. Also, we still have no contact from Mingdu. Scouts report that all long-range communication spirit tools in the Sun Moon Empire appear to be blocked by an extremely powerful force. All signals have been cut off. Shu Jiawei tapped the Zitan wood desktop with his fingertips in a steady rhythm. While the other two empires might be reeling from the shock of Shrek City's destruction and the loss of Mingdu's contact, he had already learned astonishing details through Shujuju. Mingdu had been captured by the so-called Antimatter Legion, and Lu Jingming, wishing to ensure their safety, had used mysterious spatial technology to send Shujuju, Ye Gai, and several weaker survivors back to Sea Abyss City. That was why Shujuju could send first-hand intelligence to Luo, allowing Shu Jiawei to glimpse a sliver of the truth before Tianhun and dueling. Thinking of this, Shu Jiawei felt anew the deep, unfathomable strength of Sea Abyss City. The ability to ignore distance and open spatial passages at will gave Sea Abyss City unmatched strategic mobility, an advantage no empire's traditional spirit tool logistics could match. It reinforced his conviction that his decision to back Lu Jingming and tie the Star-Crowned sect's future to Sea Abyss City had been both farsighted and bold. Pass down my orders. His voice cooled into imperial command, decisive and unambiguous. Immediately mobilize the main forces of the Northern and Eastern Border Defense Armies. Order the Royal 5th and 6th Spirit Master Legions to assemble and move to the border of the Stardew Great Forest to establish defensive positions. No one may cross the border without my written decree, but if spirit beasts attack, a crushing counterstrike is authorized. The guard commander trembled at the scale of the mobilization, but did not question it, bowing and hurrying to carry out the order. Shu Jiawei walked slowly to the window with his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the sprawling city. He was clear-eyed. There were too many suspicious factors behind this beast tide. Spirit beasts might be formidable, but it was inconceivable that they alone could annihilate Shrek Academy, with its 10,000-year foundation and countless powerhouses, pushing even a super duo like Yan Xiaojie above rank 95 beyond escape. More importantly, the battle brought no clear advantage to the spirit beasts. Frontline reports showed the Stardew Great Forest's forces had suffered heavy losses. From the remains at the scene, tens of thousands of spirit beasts had died. With beast god Detian's cunning and extreme caution, he would never sacrifice so many of his own for such a pointless victory. The only explanation was that the spirit beasts had been used, manipulated, forced into action by a mastermind. The name Xu Jiawei, remembered from Su Juju's report, chilled him, the Great Lord of Annihilation. Su Juju had not concealed everything. She knew of the second Great Lord of Annihilation, Huan Long, and she'd returned to Sea Abyss City with Ye Gai with some knowledge of conjectures involving Robin and the Black Tower. But truth and politics were separate things. Whether or not the spirit beasts had been puppets, the annihilation of Shrek City required a decisive response. If the three great empires did nothing, the morale of every spirit master on the continent would collapse, and both domestic and foreign forces would view the empire as weak and easily bullied, its prestige destroyed. Deploying troops to the border would send a message, both to the spirit beasts and to the world. The Star Luo Empire would not stand by while continental order was trampled. It had the resolve and means to uphold authority and stability. If necessary, Xu Jiawei paused, a sharp light flashing through his eyes. Consider forming a temporary alliance with the Tianhun and dueling empires and act jointly. If the Stardew Great Forest beasts remain hostile, refuse communication and continue aggression. He let the words hang. We do not rule out the possibility of the three nations joining forces to completely clear out the Stardew Great Forest. Said at any other time, that would have been unthinkable. Human spirit masters had always depended on hunting spirit beasts for spirit rings. The beasts were an indispensable resource for advancement. Even when the Stardew Great Forest launched repeated beast tides, the three great empires had at most sent troops to assist Shrek in defense. They had never contemplated, nor dared to contemplate, annihilating the forest itself. But times had changed. The destruction of Shrek City had torn away the complacency of old balances, and new, decisive actions were already being set in motion. End of this chapter. In the past, no one had seriously considered large-scale hunting of spirit beasts. It would have been unthinkable to destroy the very source of spirit rings and thereby strangle the future of spirit master civilization. But times had changed. The rise and rapid spread of the stigmata system opened a new path to power for spirit masters, removing the absolute need to hunt beasts for rings. Breakthroughs in soul guidance technology had even produced devices capable of preserving spirit ring energy and techniques that allowed non-slayers to absorb that energy. Humans could now cultivate new generations of spirit masters from stored spirit rings alone. Dependence on living spirit beasts had sunk to an all-time low. That was good for the beasts, easing their survival pressure, but it also created a terrifying new danger. Once spirit beasts ceased to be a necessary strategic resource and instead became a continent-threatening hazard, the total annihilation of the Stardew Great Forest shifted from a mad fantasy to a feasible strategy on the table of imperial war councils. Xu Jiawei lifted the detailed military map of the Star Luo Empire from his desk. His fingers traced the area between the Stardew Great Forest and Mingdu. Shrek City's destruction, the battle in Mingdu, the sudden beast tide, these earth-shattering events seemed chaotic, yet they pointed in one direction. The Douluo Continent was undergoing a change unseen in 10,000 years, a storm that would reshuffle everything. The Star Luo Empire had to find its place in that storm, brace itself, and, if possible, ride the wind. He sighed and spread the map flat, his gaze distant. Bright sunlight poured in beyond the window, over a land that had prospered for millennia, but Xu Jiawei knew the old peace was gone. A far greater tempest than the chaos in Mingdu or the ruin of Shrek was gathering, with those two episodes merely the prelude. His empire stood at the center of it, forced to advance step by terrifying step toward an unknowable future. If the three great empires decided to wipe out the Stardew Great Forest at any cost, the outcome for ordinary spirit beasts, excluding the truly vicious ones, would be catastrophic, a racial apocalypse. The three great empires were old powers with deep foundations. Counting the titled Douluo enshrined openly by the imperial families, the three empires already boasted more than 30. Once the conflict became one of racial survival, those secluded masters, Sect elders, academy deans, and reclusive loose cultivators would be drawn out by duty, glory, or the call to protect humanity. Including those hidden titans, the number of combat-capable titled Douluo humanity could mobilize would easily break 50 and might even approach 3 digits. Humanity was the uncontested dominator of the Douluo Continent. Spirit beasts could hold advantages in individual physical strength and innate talents, but against overwhelming numbers and ever-advancing soul guidance technology, they had no chance. The forest might shelter a few 100,000-year vicious beasts, but in terms of peak combatants, they could not match humanity's titled Douluo. Humans also had technological enhancements: fixed mount spirit tool cannons, chained spirit tools for Spirit Master legions, spirit tool armor. Heavy cannon arrays, operable by trained soldiers, could devastate 1,000 or 10,000-year spirit beasts with a single volley. Tens of thousands of spirit tool beams formed impenetrable fire nets that could harvest charging lower-tier beasts. From any rational military analysis, spirit beasts were comprehensively at a disadvantage. All of that assumed, however, that the Silver Dragon King Guyuena would not intervene. The 3 great empires didn't even know Guyuena existed. This ancient co-lord, a sleeping lord of creation and the elements, was the Stardo Great Forest's last and strongest trump card. Illusory Moon, the Great Annihilator, had played a cruel hand. She used Ditian to unleash the beast tide and destroy Shrek in one stroke, planting extreme fear and hatred of spirit beasts in human hearts. Seeing their kin's corpses strewn across the land, spirit beasts' resentment toward humanity had reached a fever pitch. Both sides were dry tinder soaked with oil. One spark would ignite a full-scale war that could burn the foundations of the continent's civilization. While the 3 great empires hurriedly mobilized and sealed exits and vital routes around the Stardo Great Forest, the atmosphere at the Lake of Life, the forest's heart, had grown suffocating. Ditian, temporarily frozen by Ganyu's ultimate ice, had long since broken free. The moment Huanlong's consciousness left his body, this beast god had spent every ounce of mental force and while wrestling with a destruction imprint and control mechanism Huanlong had left deep in his soul. It took him hours to break that terror's grip and regain control of his body. But Huanlong had not left empty-handed. He had embedded a malicious, corrosive mark in Ditian's flesh and soul. Ditian had taken human form. His tattered black robe framed a paper-white, bloodless face. He knelt in the damp lakeside mud, one hand pressed to his skull, veins bulging on his forehead, every line of his face wrung with soul-level agony. Before him, Guyuena stood by the shimmering water in a silver-white gown. Her purple eyes were as cold and deep as an ancient pool, emotionless. "My lord, this subordinate failed. I was careless and underestimated the enemy. I was controlled by an outside evil and caused a catastrophic mistake." Ditian's voice was hoarse, sandpaper against the air. Every word carried self-reproach. "Because of me, tens of thousands of my kin died. The clan's origin chi was gravely damaged. I deserve 10,000 deaths. I beg my lord to grant me death. Let my blood at least comfort the souls of my kin." Around him, BG, the 10,000 Demons King, Xiangjun, and other vicious beasts, also in human form, looked on with complicated, inexpressible faces. From what Guyuena had revealed, they knew the order to unleash the beast tide had not come from her, but had resulted from Ditian's tragic possession. Ditian was, in that sense, a victim, yet the brutal losses were real. BG's emerald eyes overflowed with grief. She opened her mouth to plead for Ditian, but when they met Guyuena's cold, unmoving gaze, her words died on her lips. No one dared speak without permission to this supreme co-lord of the spirit beasts. Ditian truly sought death. As the guardian and steward of the Stardew Great Forest for countless years, he had personally put the race he protected on the brink of extinction. The guilt weighed on him like a crushing stone. Under ordinary circumstances, his iron will and centuries of resilience would have driven him toward atonement through service, not surrender. The thing that drove him to beg for death was the destruction imprint Huanlong had embedded in him, a gangrene of the soul, burrowing into his marrow and corroding his soul core. Since his possession, in addition to his original dark attribute, Ditian now carried a destruction attribute full of cold stillness and annihilation. His power had increased, but at a dreadful price. His soul was forced to endure ceaseless whispers, like billions of venomous snakes, urging him to give up resistance, embrace the path of destruction, and reduce the Douluo Continent to nothing. For now, he could suppress them with the vast mental force and iron will accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years, but he did not know how long his battered spirit could hold. If his last defenses collapsed and he surrendered, he would become the vanguard of the Antimatter Legion, used to slaughter his own kind. The spirit beast race could not survive another internal catastrophe. DTN would rather die than be turned into a butcher's blade against his kin. We've just received confirmed intelligence. The 10,000 Demons King, responsible for outer perimeter vigilance, reported, kneeling and speaking with grim gravity. The three great empires have gathered numerous elite forces and sealed all known exits and important approaches to the Star Doe Great Forest. Their Spirit Master legions are constructing fortifications along the periphery, and large-caliber fixed-mount spirit tool cannons have been emplaced. Their muzzles all point toward the forest's core. Judging by their posture, they could launch a full-scale assault against us at any moment. Damn humans, Xiangjun snarled. He slammed a fist into the ground. The force made the earth tremble. His eyes bloodshot as he let out a thunderous roar. Chapter 355, Guyuena's Worries. The heavy losses suffered by his kin had long filled Xiangjun with pent-up fury. Now, hearing that the humans not only would not stop, but intended to seize the opportunity to encircle and annihilate them, he bristled with rage. His ferocious aura leaked outward uncontrollably. He already knew the truth, that the beast tide had been instigated by their own spirit beasts, but their hatred for humans ran deep. The destruction of Shrek City delighted many of them. Yet their spirit beasts had also paid a heavy price and were being manipulated. If it could end there, they might have tolerated it. But the humans were now preparing an assault on the Star Doe Great Forest. The spirit beasts, already burning with hate and rage, had no patience for negotiations. And even if the truth were revealed, who on the human side would believe that their supposed dominator, beast god DTN, had been controlled? That was a dishonor the spirit beast race would never broadcast. My lord, let me lead the Dark Gold Dreadclaw Bear clan out to strike. We will shred the human front lines and make them pay in blood. We spirit beasts will not be slaughtered like sheep, he roared. He rose to rally his troops, but a gaze so cold it could freeze the soul swept over him. Xiangjun's massive body froze. A fear hardwired into his bloodline, fear of an absolute superior, surged through him and made him tremble. His boiling blood cooled in an instant. He turned stiffly and met Guyuena's purple eyes, calm, fathomless as the starry sky. There was no anger, no reproach, only an indifferent assessment like a giant regarding an ant. Xiangjun's swagger dissolved. He dropped to his knees with a heavy thud, bowing his huge head so low he barely dared to breathe. He had defied DTN before. He had shown displeasure to gentle BG, but he would never show disrespect in front of Guyuena. The Silver Dragon King's absolute bloodline suppression was an instinct lodged deep in his soul. He knew with absolute clarity that this seemingly delicate silver-haired woman could, with a mere flick of her finger and a trace of power from her bloodline, annihilate his divine soul completely, leaving nothing, despite his reputation as a super-vicious beast prized for its robust body. A grave silence fell around the Lake of Life, broken only by leaves rustling in the wind and the muffled, painful gasps of DTN, who tried to choke them down. All the spirit beasts fixed their eyes on Guyuena, awaiting her final decision, the co-dominator whose words would decide the fate of their race. Guyuena lifted her slender hand. A faint, incredibly pure silver light shimmered from her fingertips, carrying the origin power of creation and order. The calm lake rippled, reflecting her cold, immaculate face. She did not glance at DTN, kneeling in repentance, nor at the restless Xiangjun. When she parted her red lips, her voice was ethereal, a heavenly melody that nevertheless cut straight into the soul of every spirit beast with unquestionable authority. If the humans choose war, then we will answer, she said. But the spirit beast race must never be used as unwitting pawns. The implications behind this are vast. I have my own plans. Guard this place with your lives. Do not attack humans without my order. Do not make contact with them lightly. Her gaze flickered toward the trembling Ditian, an almost imperceptible, complex expression passing through her purple eyes. Ditian, your sin cannot be atoned for by death alone. The spirit beast race stands at a critical point. Your strength is still needed. As she spoke, the silver glow from her fingertip became a stream of light and flowed into the glabella between Ditian's brows. He shuddered. The agony on his face eased somewhat. The roaring, destructive whispers in his mind were temporarily muffled, as if wrapped in a gauze of silver light. This origin power can temporarily suppress the brand of destruction within you, but it cannot remove it, Gu Yuana warned. Your duty is to lead the spirit beasts and defend the core of the Stardew Great Forest. Do not start a war with humans on a whim, and above all, do not give in to that will of destruction. Her voice remained serene but carried a thinly veiled warning. If you fail, I will personally end you and cleanse the line. Ditian looked up, eyes filled with guilt, gratitude, and fierce resolve. Ditian bows in gratitude for your grace, my lord. Rest assured, I swear here and now that if I am ever fully consumed by destruction and lose my mind, I will end myself before I can run amok. Gu Yuana gave a slight nod, then turned to the 10,000 Demons King and Xiang Jun. 10,000 Demons King, order the contraction of the defense line. All clans will retreat to the core around the Lake of Life and establish our final defenses. Xiang Jun, you will lead the Dark Gold Dreadclaw Bear clan and all frontline fighters to man the outermost vigilance. If the human army dares to step even half a pace into the core area, kill on sight. No orders needed. We obey, my lord, they answered in unison, voices full of reverence and determination. They rose and hurried to carry out her commands. BG watched Gu Yuana's calm profile, hesitated, then asked softly, My lord, the humans are advancing fiercely. Are we truly going to erupt into all-out war? The consequences would be unimaginable. Gu Yuana turned slowly toward the forest's edge. A chill flashed in her purple eyes. I will seek a way to break this deadlock. But if the humans refuse mercy and are intent on exterminating the spirit beasts. Her voice was still composed, but it now carried an aura of supreme dominance. Then let them witness the wrath of a race pushed to the brink. Let them see that its fury can burn this entire continent to ruins. Her words were quiet, but struck like thunder in the hearts of the spirit beasts. Deep within their bloodlines, they felt the resurgence of the dragon god's might, the silver dragon king's authority to command the elements, reawakened after long dormancy. Gu Yuana had made up her mind. She would leave the Stardew Great Forest and go to the Sun Moon Empire. Her primary objective was to assist Lu Jingming and jointly address the unprecedented crisis in Mingdu. Great Lord of Annihilation Xing Xiao was stationed there. A powerful divine sense clone of sea god Tang San lay hidden. Huanlong had seized the golden tree and grown in strength. The threat level had already spiked. She had to act quickly. Second, to truly resolve the unending deadlock between spirit beasts and humans and secure a sliver of hope for her people, she might need to leverage Lu Jingming's influence to create an opportunity for both sides to negotiate. Even Ditian's brand of destruction might require Lu Jingming's help. If nothing could be resolved, and the humans remained determined to exterminate the spirit beasts, then even Lu Jingming might be powerless to stop them. Gu Yuana was no coward. Having recovered 70 to 80% from her wounds, she was not afraid to contend with the human world. But the thought of facing Lu Jingming in battle, standing on opposite sides, sharpened a subtle, unmistakable pang in her heart. Lu Jingming was human. His foundations, his loyalties, what he had to protect, all belonged to humanity. Above the ruins of Mingdu, in the Sun Moon Empire, and within the Void Realm, the domain was suspended like a fragment of space carved out and hung among cold cosmic dust. The realm was utterly silent. Distant stars turned slowly, casting eternal light. Xing Xiao stood there in white, elegant and composed, staring indifferently at the scorched, chaotic battlefield below Mingdu, like a cold deity watching ants struggle. A slight crease appeared on her sculpted brows. Her slender fingers lifted, and she casually pointed into the void realm before her. Space rippled like a lake disturbed by a thrown stone. Images formed and cleared until she fixed on a figure charging out of a deep, dark rift. Whirlwinds lashed around her, sharp as blades. The majestic Fei Huang phantom, like a phoenix, arched its head and gave a long cry, and a brilliant halo cloaked the figure. In her hands, a huge, long-handled battle axe cleaved through space with overwhelming might. Heroic and fierce, battle intent soaring, it was none other than Fei Xiao, the heavenly strike general of the Immortal Boat Alliance. Heh, a soft, playful chuckle sounded behind Xing Xiao. You really thought the victorious general of the Immortal Boat Alliance would be so easily buried? Xing Xiao did not move. Her peripheral gaze, cool and detached, fell on Huanlong, who had appeared without announcement. Huanlong held a round fan. Her posture was languid yet graceful. A vast, boundless life aura flowed from her, strangely harmonizing with her destructive essence. "It seems you succeeded," Xing Xiao said, calm and clear. She showed no sign of displeasure at Huanlong's intrusion into her private observation. At a time like this, power mattered above all, and Huanlong had already moved. As a great lord of annihilation, she had transcended many of the constraints of the Douluo realm. Though she had not been formally deified by this world's rules, her combat power rivaled the so-called true gods. But Huanlong had already taken the first step. Chapter 356, Phantom Anger. Huanlong had not only gained a genuine physical body forged from the world's core, the massive golden tree, but through it had fully integrated into this world's system of laws, seizing the corresponding god position, or rather, the world rank unique to this place. That completion unquestionably raised her power above Xing Xiao's. Still, Xing Xiao's expression remained calm. As great lords of annihilation under the destruction star god Nanook, each had her own path and her own opportunity to enact destruction. Huanlong had found a shortcut. Xing Xiao had her own way to advance. The only difference was timing, so Xing Xiao yielded for now. "Thanks to you, the process went surprisingly smoothly," Huanlong said, idly fanning herself and covering her smile with a soft chuckle, voice leisurely and pleased. "After obtaining this physical body, which aligns perfectly with this world's laws, my perception has shifted entirely. I can now pinpoint the hiding place of the world will's origin." Her tone turned playful, like a cat toying with a mouse. "So, shall we still do as we planned? I'll guide you into the sea of world origin, where, using the power of harmony, you'll fuse with and replace the nascent world will, becoming this world's new heavenly Tao." This had been their original plan after being summoned and quickly analyzing the universe's laws. Servant bodies had too many limits: the master, the rules of the Holy Grail War, the hidden hand that called them, too many constraints to allow unbridled destruction. Breaking free from all that was the first step. Now, Huanlong had transcended her cage with the golden tree's power. The next step should have been to help Xing Xiao seize supreme authority over this world, using the entire Douluo world as their springboard and staging ground. Then, with the Antimatter Legion at their back, they would point their blades at the suspended god realm and bring annihilation to the whole universe. "No need," Xing Xiao said slowly, shaking her head as her gaze swept back to Mingdu, where a chaotic battle raged below, and to Fei Xiao, whose keen eyes were fixed on the location of her hidden dimension. "The plan needs adjusting. A variable has appeared. Besides the Xianzhou Alliance's general, another troublemaker is here, Genius Club member 83, Herta." She hesitated, as if weighing the words. "And she's fundamentally different from us." The moment Xing Xiao detected Herta's presence, she almost immediately realized Huanlong's plan would fail. The reputation of that aeon of intellect stretched across the universe. What surprised her was Herta's inaction. From start to finish, the aeon remained still, practically standing by as Huanlong seized the world's life core. More troubling was Herta's state. There was a fundamental difference between her and the summoned servants of this world, and even between her and the two great lords of annihilation. Herta was not a servant, nor an ordinary memory projection or clone. If she were a true body, the energy she displayed seemed too weak, but if she were a clone or memory, her existence felt disturbingly real. When they first arrived, they'd heard the name Herta, but had assumed it was a coincidence. Herta's disturbances in this world had been minor. Even with a simulated universe at her disposal, it seemed like mere tinkering. Still, they factored her into their plans. Xing Xiao had previously assumed Herta, like them, was some summoned memory body, until now. Under Xingxiao's scrutiny, there was an ineffable yet crucial distinction between the native life forms of this world and the summoned servants, the authenticity of their existence. She and Huanlong both carried a faint ethereality, as if floating between reality and illusion, rootless like duckweed. Herta was different. Though she did not act, when she used the Thousand Worlds One vehicle to open a spatial gate and transfer survivors, the power fluctuation it produced was picked up keenly by Xingxiao. That trace confirmed Herta's existence was genuine, unlike anything the Great Lords knew. It was for that reason Xingxiao had allowed the spatial gate to remain open and let many survivors escape. Now you've obtained a physical body shaped by this world's golden tree and integrated into the local laws, Xingxiao said coolly. That gives you a reality akin to a native. This confirms my observation. Herta isn't like us. She's not a servant. She's very likely her true body. Only, for some unknown reason, she's unusually weak. Unusually weak, of course, was relative. Compared to Aeon-level combatants who could destroy stars with a gesture and ignite galaxies with a thought, the current Herta was indeed fragile. Oh, is that so? Huanlong paused in her light fanning, surprise and a teasing curl touching her lips. She didn't stop me from seizing the world core? Heh, that aeon of intellect is inscrutable. Reminded by Xingxiao, Huanlong belatedly noticed how abnormally smooth her operation had been. She had prepared for obstructions and even failure. After all, the initiator of the Holy Grail War and the hidden force that summoned them would never willingly let them escape control and overturn the chessboard. This seizure had already been a provocation against the puppeteers. Yet the expected storm never came. No obstacles appeared. Her elaborate defenses had gone unused, leaving her with the absurd sensation of having fought against thin air. No matter what scheme that genius has, she would never surrender the planet's sovereignty. Allowing you to seize the golden tree is probably the most she could tolerate, Xingxiao said, her mind clear and untroubled. Since Herta was present in this world, the force behind the Holy Grail War must have understood the Great Lords of Annihilation thoroughly. And the Great Lords' goal had always been simple and brutal: spread destruction through the universe, eradicate civilizations that proliferate like a chronic illness. Wherever intelligence arises, civilizations grow, and the Lords were civilization's ultimate trial. To permit Huanlong to take the Golden Tree was already a big concession. Attempting to push further, merging with the world will, and bringing Douluo Star under destruction's banner would be a fool's dream. Xingxiao therefore abandoned the central part of the original plan without hesitation. She never relied on the enemy's mercy. Another route to power had already formed in her mind. Replacing the world will was not the only way to gain enough might to enact destruction. Humph. Huanlong's playful, cynical smile receded. A flash of cold anger lit her eyes. Herta's passivity felt like a deliberate slight and insult. Did they think Huanlong was a harmless thing to be watched and manipulated? There had been countless chances to intervene while she and Xingxiao were still weak and adapting to the world's rules, yet the other chose the most unbearable option: indulgent acquiescence. That passive condescension was another kind of arrogance, a dismissal that reduced them to mere microorganisms for observation. A long, dormant, fervent rage surged through Huanlong. How many years had it been since she felt this? Since the wounded great god had noticed and elevated her to a great lord of annihilation, who in the star sea dared underestimate her? Apart from the star gods atop the paths, the great lords themselves were natural disasters incarnate, the end of eras. Even cosmic powers like the Family, the Interastral Peace Corporation, or the Xianzhou Alliance prepared solemnly before the Lord's edge. Who would be negligent? Humph. She sneered, an immense life energy and a hidden aura of destruction swelled violently, making the pocket dimension tremble. In the next instant, her form blurred and dissolved. She left the observation domain Xingxiao had opened. Xingxiao stood unmoved, her face as impassive as 10,000 years of ice. She understood Huanlong's intent, but it was none of her concern. Though they served under Nanook, what camaraderie was that? On the road of destruction, there was only each one's will and power to fulfill their path. Huanlong was inflated by her sudden gain. Having acquired a perfect physical body from the Golden Tree, she had restored part of a great lord's true might, paired with the near bug-like immortality of the Vidyadhara and the golden tree's enormous life energy support. Her longevity might already rival aeons blessed by the abundant star god Yaoshi. The Vidyadhara were themselves a kind of abundance abomination. That reliance gave Huanlong the confidence to confront an aeon of intellect. Xingxiao did not worry about Huanlong's death. Such a fate was unlikely. But loss? That seemed probable. If Herta had knowingly allowed Huanlong to seize the golden tree, then that renowned genius must have corresponding countermeasures, perhaps even enough to neutralize a great lord of annihilation. Chapter 357, Phantom and Black Tower. Xingxiao never underestimated anyone from the Genius Club, certainly not Herta, the famed Aeon of Intellect. Members of that circle lived by unusual wisdom and creativity. Huanlong was cunning and adept at mental manipulation, but she leaned more on her race's innate talents and brute strength. In pure intellectual games of strategy, she probably wouldn't consistently beat Jing Yuan, the Xianzhou Alliance's divine strategist general. Still, letting Huanlong probe first wasn't necessarily a mistake. It was an opportunity to glimpse Herta's trump cards and intentions and to adjust a plan accordingly. Xingxiao gave a soft, almost imperceptible hum that carried a hint of cold, treating an ominous incarnation of destruction, the great lord of annihilation, as a mere chess piece. Even someone as composed as she felt the sting of that. Huanlong's form dissipated from Xingxiao's alternate dimension and, in an instant, pierced layer after layer of reality barriers, guided by the golden tree's origin to the most mysterious core of Douluo Star, the sea of stars within. This was not an ocean in the ordinary sense, but the convergence of Douluo Star's life chi and origin rules, the cradle where the world will slumbered. The surroundings were not water, but boundless, flowing streams of brilliant light, pure life chi and origin chi braided into an immense, colorful sea. Silver runes representing rules and order blinked in and out of existence like breaths. In the distance, an enormous, indescribable phantom of a tree, composed entirely of pure light, rooted itself at the center of the sea. It was the manifestation of Douluo Star's life core, the true physical body and origin of the golden tree. The golden tree outside was only a projection of its power into the material world. Because of this profound connection, Huanlong had been able to follow a subtle intuition, transcend dimensions, and find the planet's core, a place even ordinary divinities would struggle to locate, accessible only to god-king level powers. She felt an almost overwhelming affinity. The tree body here pulsed with life, every cell hungrily absorbing the surrounding life chi. Huanlong inhaled it greedily, eyes fixed on the brightest, most complex, constantly shifting halo of light deep in the sea, an intertwining of thoughts and potential. That was the nascent, childlike world-will physical body of Douluo Star. What an intoxicating cradle, nurturing the most beautiful fruit, she murmured, a sinister, determined smile curving her lips as she cocked her fan. The dim aura of destruction around her began to harmonize with and quietly erode the life Holy Land's energy, showing the first signs of usurpation, transforming this cradle into one of annihilation. Soon, all of this will belong to your destruction, right? A calm, indifferent voice, with a hint of impatience and dreamlike languor, cut across the normally silent sea of flowing energy. Huanlong froze. The destructive aura around her choked. She spun, destruction coiled at her fingertips. Not far away, the light streams, as if aware, split and rose on either side, sweeping together into a magnificent throne. It had sleek lines, a purplish-black metallic sheen, and a distinctly technological air. On it sat a tall, graceful woman in a sharply designed dress that declared witch-like mystery. Under the pointed brim of her hat, a few brown strands framed a beautiful face marked by boredom and annoyance. One leg, sheathed in fine black stockings, crossed elegantly over the other. Her slender fingers tapped the armrest. Her purple eyes looked on with the detached scrutiny of someone examining an uninteresting sample. Herta. Huanlong's voice was low. The inviting smile that usually masked her emotions vanished. Cold vigilance and offended anger took its place. She sensed the being before her was genuinely Herta, different from any stand-in, different from Xingxiao. Who else could it be? Herta pouted in undisguised disdain. Do you think I have an actor on shift here every day? You were waiting here. Huanlong said, keeping the shock down, her tone icy. So you finally show yourself. Are you planning to stop me personally? Herta waved a hand like shooing a bothersome insect. This isn't your area. Leave, quickly, before I decide it would be more amusing to tie you to an experimental table. Her eyes flicked, disinterested, past Huanlong to the trembling world will halo behind them. As for that, don't even think about touching it. It's primitive, stupid, like hardware with no operating system. But by some fluke, it found a powerful backer. If you touch it, you won't be able to pay the price. Her casual analogy, as if settling a trivial matter, dismissed Huanlong's threat outright. That provoked Huanlong's restrained destruction to erupt. Emerald life chi braided with dark annihilation energy into shockwaves that tore at the pure light streams, trying to rend this suffocating arrogance in the space itself. Are you underestimating a great lord of annihilation? Huanlong snapped, voice sharp. Do you think a few words will make me back down without a fight? Herta rolled her eyes. Tsk, save it, stop acting. Her voice barely rippled. I don't recall you, who are so good at manipulating minds, having such a hot temper, though you do get conceited with new toys. I noted that. The destructive aura that would have alarmed a Tier 1 divinity paused, then receded with unnerving speed, as if it had never been. Huanlong's theatrical anger melted like ice. She returned to a cold, seductive calm, the earlier outburst clearly part play, part probe. As a great lord of annihilation skilled in psychological warfare, she never risked carelessness. Herta's calm, almost bored posture meant a trap had likely been set. Huanlong would not unthinkingly walk into danger and suffer mockery from her taciturn colleague, Xing Xiao. Her destructive energy folded into a dangerous equilibrium. A deeper, more dangerous light flickered in her eyes. She chuckled and let the hand fan stir again, teasing threads of life and annihilation through the air. Ha ha ha! As expected of a prominent Genius Club member, she said, voice languid, laced with a subtle mental goo. Young Miss Herta, indulge a humble girl's curiosity. Did you really wait here just to give me a verbal warning? Or is this entire sea of stars within a cage you set for an uninvited guest? She spoke like poison and sent a barely perceptible mental probe with it, part experiment, part erosion, aimed at Herta on the technological throne. The thread of will, infused with the great lord's intent, flowed toward the Aeon. It vanished when it was still 3 feet away from Herta, as if striking an invisible wall. It wasn't blocked or repelled, it simply ceased to exist. The trace of Huanlong's will that rode on it was erased instantly, without a ripple to mark its passing. Huanlong's probing barely registered with Herta. The woman didn't even bother to lift an eyelid. She idly twirled a strand of brown hair around a slender finger, as if she hadn't been the one tested moments before. A cage? She said flatly, as if stating a basic law of the universe. Her voice carried a self-evident indifference. You think too highly of yourself. This place only needs to remain still, and you. She finally looked at Huanlong, her gaze cool and detached, like someone observing an old noisy machine. You're too loud. You're disturbing the peace here. Huanlong felt a tightening in her chest. Herta's contemptuous disregard for defense made the woman seem even more unfathomable. The seductive smile Herta usually wore lingered, and she started to probe again with words, aiming to find a weakness. Then Herta, perched on her throne, seemed to lose the last scrap of patience. Enough. Engaging in such inefficient chatter is meaningless, she muttered, annoyed by the noise. Fortunately, that kid is reliable. He guessed you'd come sniffing around like a fly, so he prepared a big surprise for you. She made no grand gesture. Her fingertip, the nail-painted purple, tapped the armrest. No dramatic light, no soul-shaking power, but in the next instant it felt as if the operating rules of the Sea of Stars had been quietly rewritten. Around them, the familiar currents of life still pulsed, but within that vast sea, a small, absolutely real domain silently opened and anchored itself, a point of certainty that ignored illusions and energy interference and rooted itself in the foundation of reality. Reflected in Huanlong's suddenly narrowed pupils, something stepped out of that anchor. A tall figure emerged, upright, dressed in purple, an ancient long tachi at her hip. Slightly curly purple hair fell like a waterfall, streaked here and there with crimson like dried blood. Her skin was an almost inhuman, translucent pallor, Her beauty was unnerving in its silence. Deep purple eyes, hollow and all-consuming, seemed to reflect echoes of universes that had already cooled into heat death, utter, cold nothingness. She stood without emitting any energy fluctuation. Around her there was only a boundless stillness that made every creature instinctively hold its breath. This was not ordinary calm. It was the concept of nothingness incarnate, an ultimate, reductive void where even the ideas of space and non-existence were subject to negation. Huanlong's pupils shrank to pinpricks. A chill, rooted in the most primal instinct for survival, raced through her and almost froze her soul. As a lord of annihilation who had witnessed and wrought countless ends, she had seen every doomsday imaginable, but seldom had she felt such pure, absolute despair. A nothingness that went beyond destruction and threatened to erase the very concept of destruction itself. Herta's legs, clad in black stockings, shifted lightly. She snapped her fingers and looked at Huanlong, whose composed smile had vanished, in an almost playful, possessive expression. "Let me introduce her. Her name is Yellow Springs, and a void emissary who theoretically shouldn't exist. Contradictory, isn't it? But putting aside the philosophy, she's quite formidable in a fight. How do you like this gift?" When Herta first heard from Lu Jingming that one of his trump cards for a worst-case scenario was a void emissary, even the well-informed Herta had been astonished. A void emissary shouldn't exist. Her very being contradicted most frameworks of understanding and would have made her irresistible to Herta's curiosity. If circumstances had been different, Herta would have dragged Yellow Springs back to a lab and dissected her existence to its core. Huanlong's usual all-knowing smile was gone. An instinctive alarm screamed through her mind. This could be the moment of catastrophic defeat. She did possess terrifying durability. Blessings from the Sui Yang and overlays of the Golden Tree physical body made her survival rivals that of emissaries blessed by the abundance Aeon Yaoshi. Truly lethal methods in the Sea of Stars were rare. Yet this Yellow Springs, this walking nothing, was precisely one of those rare exceptions, and the most extreme at that. Nothingness negated existence itself, and its force was barely affected by other elemental powers. Instead, it eroded, disintegrated, and could utterly erase other forms of existence. Huanlong snapped her defenses to their highest setting. All pretense was gone. She fixed her full attention on Yellow Springs, treating her as a genuine threat. If she miscalculated now, the Lord of Annihilation could suffer an unexpected downfall. Yellow Springs' hollow gaze drifted to Huanlong. There was no hostility, no scrutiny, not even emotion, only an indifferent flatness, as if she were looking at a roadside stone or a withered leaf about to blow away. Under that vacant stare, Huanlong felt everything she possessed, her power, her plans, even the foundation of her being, shrink to something petty and futile. She gathered her strength instinctively. Emerald and pitch-black light, a fusion of life and destruction, flared as she tried to construct a defensive bulwark against the eroding void. Huanlong's mouth twitched. She forced herself to speak, grasping for diplomacy. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding? Could we temporarily truce? Maybe reach a peaceful resolution?" Yellow Springs answered with action rather than words. No warning, no draw of sword, no killing aura. Huanlong detected only the faintest fluctuation of will. Then, out of nothing, a boundary appeared, not an energy shield or a spatial cut, but a slash composed purely of nothingness. It spanned between Huanlong and the glowing seed of will behind her, negating being with precise, immaculate intent. It did not attack Huanlong directly, but it severed any possibility for her to reach or even perceive the plane's will. Huanlong's protective fusion of life and destruction touched that nothing slash and, like dew under a hot sun, part of it evaporated without spectacle. No explosion, no impact, no discernible process. That piece of energy and the existence it represented were simply erased from the plane of reality, reverted to the most primitive nothingness. Ugh, Huanlong choked, recoiling in shock and horror. Yellow Springs hadn't needed to strike. By drawing that boundary, she had already wounded Huanlong. Yellow Springs stood calmly, eyes hollow as ever, as if she had performed a trivial, instinctive gesture. She rested a pale hand on the tachi at her waist. That minimal motion, barely a preparation, sent a bone-deep chill through Huanlong. She understood with terrible clarity that if the other woman chose to actually attack next time, it would not be a mere boundary. Huanlong stared at the blade of nothingness, tearing reality, and at the purple figure behind it, hand on hilt. The pride of a lord of annihilation flared like a consuming fire. To withdraw now? To be driven off by a suddenly appearing void emissary and a few words from an aeon of erudition would be humiliation. Within the Antimatter Legion, within the universe, she would become a jest. Xingxiao, the cold, taciturn one who treated beings as tools, would catalog this as mockery for ages. Even in a different world where few knew her name, the dignity of a lord of annihilation would not allow such contempt. She could not simply retreat. At the very least, she had to probe the true nature and limits of this so-called void emissary, to see, even if just a sliver, what model of power she represented. End of chapter. Chapter 359, I Mourn for the Dead. As long as she could probe the depths of Yellow Springs, even if she eventually had to retreat, she would at least bring back valuable intelligence instead of suffering a meaningless defeat. At that thought, a gleam sparked in Huanlong's eyes. She had chosen to take a dangerous gamble, but she feared death only lightly. As the most cunning, most troublesome lord of annihilation and an expert in self-preservation, she had prepared countless escape routes, more than a rabbit with 3 burrows. Even if this painstakingly forged Golden Tree physical body collapsed here, she had concealed parts of her core consciousness so a comeback would remain possible. Temporary origin chi depletion was far preferable to losing face permanently. With the worst prepared for, Huanlong's alluring smile returned to her pale face, now laced with a cold, killing intent and icy provocation. Emissary of the Void Realm. Heh, heh! What an impressive title. She fanned herself with the strange fan. The emerald lifelight and the pitch-black aura of destruction around her roared back to life. More turbulent than before, two opposite, inherently repellent forces, life and death, were forced together by her will into writhing torrents of dark energy, capable of corroding stars and annihilating laws. But to think a single epithet could halt a lord of annihilation, that would be underestimating the power of destruction, she said. The fusion of creation and termination did not surge straight at Yellow Springs. Instead, it abruptly changed course and smashed into the dazzling current of lifelight in the sea of stars itself. Huanlong's intent was clear. She meant to force Yellow Springs to intercept by attacking the planet's core, to see how the Guardian would respond. She also wanted to create massive energy chaos and visual cover, perfect timing for a follow-up strike or escape. But Yellow Springs' reaction to this violent assault was breathtakingly calm. She stood like an ancient rock, only her pale fingers tightened imperceptibly on the purplish-black sword hilt. There was no cataclysmic energy collision, no blinding flare. The torrent of destruction, capable of annihilating stars, lost its power the instant it entered a certain range of Yellow Springs. As if stripped by an absolute rule, the torrent's very meaning and basis of existence were negated. The violent energy composing it lost all internal logic and external definition and simply dissipated, erased from existence to absolute, eternal nothingness. The process was eerily silent and smooth, as if it were meant to be. Huanlong's pupils contracted, but she did not stop. She grew more ferocious and cunning. Denser, dark rays of destruction shot toward Yellow Springs from strange angles. Several insidious, lightning-fast beams aimed for the distant, trembling halo of the plane wheel, the thing Yellow Springs was bound to protect. For the first time, the usually silent Yellow Springs moved more noticeably. She tightened her grip on the hilt, not a swift martial draw, but a slow, ritualistic gesture that seemed laden with weight. As she moved, a mind-numbing domain unfurled silently, spreading outward. Colors bled away into dead gray, things lost luster and vitality, sounds were swallowed, even the thrumming energy currents became an absurd, silent pantomime. Existence itself slid toward meaninglessness and the edge of being. I weep for the departed, a hollow, ethereal voice intoned, as if from the void. Devoid of joy, anger, sorrow, or delight, it carried only the still compassion of farewell. The world drained of color, turning absolute gray and white. Yellow Springs' smooth purple hair faded to a deathly gray, and two thick rivulets of blood-like tears slid from her hollow eye sockets, beautiful and eerie. Living, blood-red tattoos spread up from her fair neck, crawling across half her face and body, as if she had been pulled from a pool of blood. In that colorless field of death, Yellow Springs alone was the single splash of crimson. She revealed her true nature as an emissary of the Void Realm. Her figure seemed to tower and shrink at once, both a god presiding over the end and a mote of dust in the void. The katana in her hand was not fully unsheathed, only a small sliver of its dark red blade, as if capable of devouring light and hope, showed. She made a casual, gentle sweep toward Huan Long. There was no brilliant sword light, no violent spatial ripples, not even ordinary energy waves. Huan Long only felt her very existence struck by an absolute concept of negation. Her protective golden tree physical body, her vast vitality, even portions of her soul origin and consciousness, everything became transparent and illusory. Then, from the most fundamental level, they began to collapse, disintegrate, and dissipate like a sandcastle in the wind. This was not destruction of form or energy, it was a deeper fall, from being to non-being. Huan Long spat a mouthful of dark gold liquid, not blood, but a mingling of destructive energy and life origin. Her body spasmed, her aura wilted at terrifying speed. Terror filled her eyes. She clearly felt part of her existence permanently erased from the universe. If she had not hidden a portion of her core origin, and if the golden tree body had not provided such a buffer of vitality, that casual strike would have plunged her, a lord of annihilation, into eternal sleep or utter oblivion. Cannot contend. The thought rang like a death knell in her soul, shattering all hope. Abandoning dignity, Huan Long screamed, pain and fury in one, and detonated the escape contingency she had buried in the golden tree body, including parts already eroded by the void and beyond rescue. Boom! A chaotic, distorted energy storm erupted, anomalous in nature, briefly interfering with the merciless expansion of the void realm. Seizing that fleeting, precious moment, a dark, deep spatial rift tore open to some distant, unknown coordinate. Huan Long's illusory, shattered form dove into it like a startled bird and vanished. Herda, Yellow Springs, this lord remembers you. Destruction will come. Even as she fled, Huan Long's hoarse vow carried through the closing rift, clinging to pride. The tear sealed, the sea of stars stilled. Only the area disturbed by Huan Long's self-detonation and a lingering residue of destructive aura remained, marks of the brutal, humiliating defeat a lord of annihilation had just suffered. Yellow Springs slowly sheathed the katana, nothingness, and the stilled void domain quietly faded. Color and sound returned, but her hollow, all-consuming eyes watched silently where Huan Long had disappeared. Another blood debt, she murmured, voice soft, ethereal, yet weighted with cold resignation. On the throne, Herda recovered from watching the battle. Her composed face tightened in a rare way. Her all-seeing eyes flickered with a strange light as she stared at Yellow Springs. She had long known, from Lu Jingming, that Yellow Springs was immensely powerful and had been confident the emissary could suppress or repel the incomplete Huan Long memory body. After all, Lu Jingming had summoned that special existence at the cost of massive true power. Even weakened, it should not have been impossible for Yellow Springs to handle. But Herda had not expected such a clean, decisive victory. Yellow Springs had, in essence, made a single casual strike. Yet that strike, imbued with the Tao of the Void Realm, had made a notorious Lord of Annihilation truly feel defeat and fear, nearly ending her. The power that drained the world of color and negated the foundations of existence had a frightening precedence, as if it transcended many of the universe's rules. This gave Herda's simulated universe project several crucial revolutionary parameters. Herda glanced at the plain will's halo beside her. It still trembled, radiating fear. From its budding consciousness, she could tell it feared Yellow Springs even more than Huan Long. That was telling. Huan Long had openly coveted and tried to devour it, while Yellow Springs had shown no malice. She had even seemed to protect it. Yet the world will instinctively feared Yellow Springs more. The reason was simple. Huan Long's destruction was a violent change of existence, but Yellow Springs' void realm offered total negation of existence itself. Once marked by the void, even a world will could be erased, its traces removed from the record of being. That was a despair even deeper than annihilation by a Lord of Annihilation. End of chapter. Chapter 360, Star Howl and Phantom. This fellow runs fast. His knack for survival is first-rate. Herda pouted, a trace of regret curling her lips. She had hoped to gather more complete data on the Lord of Annihilation's near-death state. Then, as if she'd suddenly remembered something, she flicked her wrist and produced an object from nowhere, tossing it toward Yellow Springs, who stood motionless. "Hey, catch this. That little guy specifically told me to give it to you after you finished fighting." It was a plump, juicy peach, exuding a tempting sweetness. For an instant, a nearly imperceptible but real glimmer returned to Yellow Springs' hollow, lifeless eyes. She reached out with gentle, practiced movements and caught the peach in midair. "Thank you." Her voice was soft, and the otherworldly tint that usually colored it had thinned, replaced by the faintest hint of human life chi. She loved peaches. The fruit embodied growth, the sweetness of sun and rain, and the fragile, fleeting quality of life, contradictions that always stirred subtle ripples in her calm heart. Watching Yellow Springs come alive, contented from nothing more than a peach, Herta pursed her lips, an unreadable expression crossing her face. For beings like them, summoned by Lu Jingming in a special way, Lu Jingming had a way of knowing them better than they knew themselves. Preferences, quirks, secret cravings, he always seemed to have the right key. Even though Yellow Springs had only recently been called to this world, she had become one of Lu Jingming's most reliable enforcers. What could bring light back into an emissary of the void who should be untouched by earthly things was not some magnificent revelation, but a simple peach. Who else would have thought to use such a thing? Who else could have pulled it off but Lu Jingming? Yellow Springs had spent her existence chasing fleeting encounters to stave off the hollow cold of nothingness. Lu Jingming offered new, unexpected anchors, moments that let her slip free of the void's bottomless maw for a while. That was why she so readily aided him, coming to the Sea of Stars to intercept the great annihilator, Illusory Moon. The mission is finally done. This place can rest for a while. Herta rose from her throne and stretched, every curve of her languid body on display. "All right, that's a wrap." She clapped, and her figure, along with the high-tech throne, began to dissolve like a data stream being erased. "Tell that little guy I handled his problem, and make sure the lab consumables he owes me are doubled, not a gram less." Before she finished speaking, she and the throne had vanished as if they'd never been there. Yellow Springs remained, gazing where Herta had disappeared for a long, quiet moment. Slowly she turned and looked at the aura of the world's will, which still trembled and exuded waves of fear. Her hollow gaze lingered on it. "Only oblivion," she murmured, barely a breath, yet the words carried an old, chilling weight. "Is true, eternal demise." Her purple form faded quietly like ink dissolving in water, turning to nothing and disappearing into the now quiet Sea of Stars. The ripples hadn't fully settled when, in a separate space attached to the Douluo world's barrier, cold starlight fell like a curtain, lighting Xingxiao's indifferent profile, every feature carved from 10,000 years of frost. She stood in the void realm as if she were part of that silent domain. Suddenly, the smooth, mirror-like observation interface before her warped violently, shattering like glass under massive strain. A web of cracks raced outward. From the fractured surface, a faint, dark green stream of light, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding void, burst through, dragging with it an indescribable chaos, a sense of decay and depletion. It slammed onto the invisible floor of that space, sending out ripples as of unseen energy. As the light thinned, the figure within became clear. Huan Long, the same woman who had entered the Sea of Stars with so much confidence moments before, had returned, but she had shed all seduction and majesty. Her perfect physical body, painstakingly built from the golden tree's core, was now riddled with countless hairline cracks. These were not ordinary wounds, but etheric scars left by the forced erasure of some fundamental aspect of her being. Along the fissures, a chilling concept of nothingness lingered, steadily corroding the rules around it. Her flesh had gone translucent, her aura was shriveled and weak. The emerald life chi and pitch-black destructive energy that had once braided around her now guttered like a candle in the wind, unstable and ready to snuff out. She lay curled on the ground, trembling, each breath bleeding precious life energy and making it a struggle to hold even the basic shape of herself. She labored to raise her head. The eyes that had once enthralled everyone were filled with pain and weakness, spiced with anger and humiliation. A clear, calm voice without emotion sounded from nearby. "It seems your probing did not go smoothly." Xingxiao didn't turn fully. She tilted her head, inspecting her disheveled colleague with cool, rational detachment. "Indeed, I was careless." Huanlong's voice was hoarse, but she had not lost composure. Under the pain, there was a bitter, almost amused edge. "The emissary of the void. Heh, an emissary of the void indeed. Unexpected." Xingxiao stepped forward in a measured way and stood over her. Her cold gaze swept the wounds and paused on the cracks that radiated the concept of nothingness, as if cataloging them. Void power, and emissary rank power at that. Her tone was flat and factual. "No wonder you're in this state. I suspected it, but I didn't expect you'd be defeated so utterly." She knew Huanlong well. The woman could scheme and plot with the best of them, but her fatal flaw was hubris. When she felt superior, she swelled with confidence, and that swelling became a downfall against those of equal or greater strength. Bolstered by the golden tree physical body, Huanlong had become arrogant. Even though Herta was likely to have laid an ambush in the Sea of Stars, Huanlong had charged in regardless, trusting in her newfound immortality and strength to see her through. Judging by the result, survival was about all she could claim. To be ambushed by an aeon of erudition and an emissary of the void and still limp away alive was, in a grim way, an achievement. Herta didn't attack me directly. Huanlong fought to calm the chaotic energies within her. Slowly, the wild fluctuations leveled, and her form began to stabilize. Her eyes regained some of their sharpness. Calculation glittered behind the pain. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it back alive. At the very least, this hard-won physical body would have been destroyed. I have a sense of what happened. Xingxiao said it with the same detached coolness. She had met too many would-be rulers who tried to harness the Antimatter Legion for their own ends. Most who played that game burned up in their own flames, using two Lords of Annihilation as pawns to pave the way or achieve some goal. Huanlong forced back the worst of her agony and let her smile return, her fan reappearing in a practiced flick. She covered her mouth and gave a brittle chuckle, as if her earlier ruin were a bad dream. "I'm getting more and more interested in Herta and whoever is truly pulling her strings." The loss had stung, but anger and humiliation were temporary fuel. As a Lord of Annihilation, she prized tangible gains. She had at least extracted crucial intelligence, the rise of an unprecedented emissary of the void, the terrifying nature of that power, and the mastermind's complex intentions, both to use and to contain. That knowledge alone was invaluable. "How long will you need to recover?" Xingxiao glanced at Huanlong's slowly knitting wounds. Her question was pragmatic. With Herta and an emissary of the void personally guarding the world's will, the situation was already grim. Hope was gone. Still, Huanlong's strength remained an indispensable part of any plan. Besides Herta and the others who had let them escape, two emissaries of the hunt were also standing in their way. End of chapter.